The wife begs for forgiveness after betrayal. Lin Fan worked hard to make his alcoholic and gambling addicted adoptive parents live a wealthy life, and made his fiancée a famous beautiful CEO. He even took the blame for his fiancée and went to jail for 3 years. He learned medicine and martial arts in prison and mastered a lot of skills. On the day he was released from prison, Lin Fan was full of joy and longed for his family to reunite. But what he saw was the ugly faces of his adoptive parents and fiancée who turned their kindness into enmity. Adoptive parents, you are a jinx. Now that we have found our own son, we can no longer use you. Fiancé, I am the pearl in the sky, and you are reptile on the ground. You are not worthy of me now. Lin Fan sneered. Without me, what are you? Chapter 1. Yunshan City, South Suburb Prison Gate. Lin Fan looked up at the gloomy sky and exhaled a heavy breath. It had been a full 3 years since he entered prison. Soon, he would be reunited with his parents and see his beloved fiancée. How could he not be moved? He turned on his phone, dialed for numbers in a row, but all of them were disconnected. A hint of worry flashed in Lin Fan's eyes. Could something have happened at home? At that moment, a red BMW screeched to a halt in front of him. The fiancé's secretary casually threw a bank card at Lin Fan's feet and coldly sneered. I'll say this once, listen carefully. The 2 million on the card is a gift from our CEO. Don't ever say you know her, or it'll tarnish her reputation. Otherwise, you'll regret it. After finishing, the woman climbed into the BMW and started the car to leave. Lin Fan's face darkened completely. Bang! He kicked the car door hard, his eyes cold and menacing. Is this what Wu Meiling wants? Secretary Li got out of the car and glared at the dented door, her eyes widening with rage. She pointed at Lin Fan and cursed loudly, have you lost your mind after being in prison? You dumb fool! Lin Fan's forehead veins popped, and his fists clenched so tightly that they cracked. During university, he had founded a company that made tens of millions and became a campus figure. Wu Meiling pursued him for 2 years before he was moved and became her boyfriend. After graduation, he became Yunshan City's youngest and most successful entrepreneur. Back then, Wu Meiling's family business was on the verge of bankruptcy, and he invested 50 million to help it revive. Even his time in prison had been because he took the fall for her driving under the influence. That day, she cried in his arms, promising to marry him once he was out of prison. But now? Wu Meiling actually wanted to sever ties with him. She even sent a secretary to humiliate him with money. 2 million, really? So much for his dignity. Lin Fan sneered, his eyes growing colder. No wonder you haven't come to visit me in 3 years. I was blind, couldn't see that she had the heart of a wolf and the lungs of a dog. Secretary Li gritted her teeth, threw off her high heels, and hurled them at Lin Fan. Stupid fool, who allowed you to speak like that about the CEO? Lin Fan tilted his head to dodge, then raised his hand and slapped her, sending her sprawling to the ground. Talking nonsense, you should wear a toilet on your head. He sneered again. How ironic. You dare hit me, you idiot. Secretary Li crawled up, covering her bleeding face, her eyes filled with resentment. Do you still think you're that hotshot businessman? You're nothing but garbage. Even your real parents don't want you. Those words hit Lin Fan's breaking point. Bang! Lin Fan's eyes were cold, and with a kick, he sent the woman flying, smashing her against the prison gate. At that moment, a Rolls-Royce slowly drove up. Liu Yuanhui, the richest man in South Province, hurriedly got out of the car and respectfully said, Mr. Lin, I heard you were released today. Lin Fan nodded expressionlessly. He sat in the car and said indifferently, take me to the Zhou family. An hour later. Yunhu Villa District. Lin Fan got out of the car, exhaled, and hid his anger. Wu Meiling's betrayal was nothing new, but he would not let that bad mood affect his parents. Liu Yuanhui glanced at the villa by the lake and sincerely said, Mr. Lin, my daughter's ALS has completely healed. She specifically asked me to thank you when we arrived. Since you're reunited with your family, I won't bother you. Lin Fan nodded without expression and walked towards his villa. Just as he reached the door, he heard the cheerful voices of his family from inside. Wife, ask the nanny if the chicken soup is ready. Our son will be home soon. Got it. After dinner, let us take him to buy a car. The ones in the garage are outdated. Hearing the warm voices of his family, Lin Fan's face softened with a smile. Taking a deep breath, he opened the villa door and called out to Zhou Daong, who was sitting on the sofa smoking a pipe. "Dad, I'm back." Zhou Daong looked up and, the moment he saw Lin Fan, his eyes flashed with astonishment. His smile immediately disappeared. "Who told you to come back?" His cold question and the look of disgust in his eyes froze Lin Fan in place. At that moment, Wang Fang, who was overseeing things in the kitchen, turned around. Seeing Lin Fan, her eyes widened, and she pointed at him, asking again, "Who allowed you to come in?" Her tone and look were full of disdain. The nanny, who didn't recognize Lin Fan, seemed to find an opportunity to show off and rushed towards him with a kitchen knife, shouting, "What are you doing here? Get out now, or I'll call the police." Lin Fan's smile, when he entered the door, completely froze. He stood there, stunned, unable to react. "Dad, Mom, what is this?" But that address seemed to touch Zhou Daong's nerves. He slammed his palm on the table, his face darkening as he growled, "Who told you to call us that? Who are your parents?" Wang Fang crossed her arms and sat back down on the sofa, staring coldly at Lin Fan. "Why didn't you die in prison?" She then turned to Zhou Daong. "Since this disaster is here, let us make things clear today, so he doesn't cause trouble for our Zhou family in the future." Zhou Daong remained expressionless, not even glancing at Lin Fan. "Our Zhou family only has one daughter and one son. The daughter is Zhou Shuyi, and the son is Zhou Hairan. 6 months ago, Hairan came back, and everything belonging to the Zhou family will go to him from now on. I won't allow an outsider to stay in our house, lest Hairan be wronged." After saying this, Zhou Daong's tone grew even colder. "Raising you, sending you to school, all the great favors we did for you don't need repayment, but don't ever disturb our lives again." His words echoed throughout the villa. The last bit of tenderness in Lin Fan's eyes completely vanished, replaced by a cold sneer on his face. Wang Fang grabbed the ashtray and threw it at Lin Fan, gritting her teeth as she cursed. "Still have the nerve to smile? Hairan couldn't be found for all these years, and it's all your fault, you bringer of misfortune." Chapter 2. Harbinger of Doom. The label shattered the last vestiges of Lin Fan's hope for this family. He was an orphan, abandoned at just a few months old at the entrance of a police station, with nothing but a jade pendant engraved with a name. At 3 years old, he was adopted by the Zhou family. The adoptive parents had a biological son who was also lost when he was just a baby. From the very beginning, Lin Fan knew he was just a substitute. Zhou Daong and Wang Fang always treated him coldly, never once smiling at him. They had adopted him just to ensure their old age would be taken care of. But Lin Fan cherished the family he had come to, a family he fought hard for. From a young age, he learned to please his adoptive parents and older sister. He did all the chores, washing, cooking, working the fields, always the most diligent of the bunch. He paid for his own tuition by collecting bottles and exchanging them for cash. He worked part-time during university to avoid adding any burden to his adoptive parents. The money for university came from his job on construction sites during holidays. He believed that one day his adoptive parents would see him as their real son. After his success in business during college, he bought a big villa for the family and luxury cars. He even sent his older sister abroad to study, turning the Zhou family into one of the wealthiest in Yunshan City. Even the company's shares he only held 20%, with the rest in the names of his adoptive parents and sister. Over the years, he even went to great lengths to investigate the whereabouts of his adoptive parents' real son. He had already uncovered quite a few clues before he was imprisoned. Without him, Zhou Hairan would have never found his way back. But now, they called him a harbinger of doom. Wasn't it ironic? For over 20 years, he had called them Mom and Dad, and now he was being referred to as an outsider. He thought of Wu Meiling, that worthless woman. It turned out that sincerity never earned you anything but cruel trampling. Zhou Daong took a few puffs from his pipe. When he saw Lin Fan still standing there, he slammed his hand on the coffee table, glaring as he shouted, "Why don't you leave already? You think you can stick to the Zhou family, huh? We owe you nothing." Hearing this, Lin Fan could no longer hold back. His eyes went red as he gritted his teeth and spoke. "Good job, Zhou family, owe me nothing, huh?" Lin Fan erupted completely. He pointed at Zhou Daong with a cold smile. "If it weren't for me, you would have drowned in that pond after getting drunk. If it weren't for me, could you even afford the 2 million for your surgery? Could you even be alive today? And you? Lin Fan turned to Wang Fang, the woman who had never given him a single kind look. You beat me, you cursed me since I was a child, and when you lost money, you vented your anger on me. But the jewelry on you, everything in this villa what isn't bought with my hard-earned money. Without me, you'd still be the worthless couple that everyone in the village looked down on. A gambler and a drunkard, could you ever live this good life? What did you ever give me? I ate leftovers, I slept on broken wooden planks. Adopting me was just so you could rely on me in old age. Now that I'm of no use, I become a harbinger of doom. Who would think that I dug up your family's graves? Lin Fan's voice rattled Zhou Deyong and Wang Fang's eardrums. But neither of them showed any remorse. Zhou Deyong raised his hand and slammed it on the coffee table again, putting on the airs of the head of the family. We are above you now. You're just a labor camp convict. What right do you have to shout here? I'll tell you straight, those 20% of the shares you have. They've been transferred to Hiren's name. You're nothing. If I feel like it, I have 1,000 ways to end you. Harbinger of doom, Wang Fang added in a sharp voice, if you weren't one, could your parents have thrown you at the police station gate? Not a harbinger of doom. Then why, when you were around, couldn't we find Hiren? But as soon as you went to prison, Hiren found us. Don't tell me you're not the one cursing our Zhou family. Lin Fan sneered repeatedly. This verbal sparring was utterly pointless. Today, the Zhou family was severing all ties with him, and from now on, they would be strangers. These two fleas in front of him, how much longer could they keep their arrogance? Did they still think he was the same fool from 3 years ago, patient and submissive? He had plenty of ways to make them regret this. His eyes turned cold. Without a word, he turned to leave. But just then, the villa door swung open again. A man and a woman walked in side by side. The woman had a perfect figure, an exquisite face, and a graceful aura. She wore a black bodycon dress, and her legs were so pale they almost glowed. It was Wu Meiling. Lin Fan's eyes instantly turned cold, and he looked at the young man Wu Meiling was holding on to. He was wearing a beige suit, about 1.8 meters tall, with a fairly handsome face. But unfortunately, he lacked a certain masculine energy, his face somewhat delicate. When he saw Lin Fan staring at him, Zhou Hiren showed a thoughtful expression, and then, suddenly, his eyes widened in delight. You're Lin Fan, my second older brother, right? Lin Fan's gaze was indifferent. He looked at the long-lost Zhou family son, whom he had searched for tirelessly. He glanced at the hand Wu Meiling was holding his with, then sneered. Trash with trash, playing pretend. Zhou Hiren, with a face full of excitement, called out, second brother. But what kind of brother would hook up with his brother's fiancée while he was in prison? Second brother, don't be angry. Zhou Hiren looked anxious, trying to explain. I know it was wrong, but Meiling and I love each other. You can't force matters of the heart. As he spoke, his eyes turned red, his voice sincere. Second brother, please don't blame Meiling. If you're upset, just hit me. As he spoke, he clenched his fist and hit his chest twice. This made Wang Fang rush forward, her heart aching for her precious son. She stood in front of Zhou Hiren, blocking him from Lin Fan. Good son, stop calling him that. He doesn't deserve to be part of our Zhou family, let alone be your second brother. Our family has cut ties with him. Zhou Hiren froze for a moment and then looked frantic. Mom, how can we do that? Second brother has been with our family for over 20 years. We are family. Zhou Deyong, who had been sitting on the sofa, suddenly stood up. His eyes were full of disgust, and his words were harsher than ever. Hiren, we are a wealthy family. He is just a convict. He doesn't even have the right to be our servant. People are different. You're a graduate student from Beijing University, now you've even brought investment from the Yuanhui Group to our Zhou family. You are a true prodigy, and what is he? Wang Fang nodded in agreement, pulling Zhou Hiren aside and advising him. Hiren, this harbinger of doom is cursed for our family. Mom had someone read the fortune, and keeping him around will harm you and even ruin our business. I know you're kind-hearted, but don't make a foolish mistake now. Zhou Hiren's eyes flickered with a hint of cunning that was hard to detect. The fortune teller Wang Fang had consulted had been arranged by him. The transfer of Lin Fan's shares to his name also had his fingerprints all over it. But his face showed nothing but innocence and sincerity, and he seemed so anxious that he was almost crying. Second brother, please don't leave, I don't want your shares. Zhou family's assets will always have your portion. Slap. Lin Fan raised his hand and slapped Zhou Haoran so hard that stars appeared in his eyes, his head ringing. His eyes were full of coldness. He hated these two-faced, backstabbing idiots who pretended to be kind while being clever behind the scenes. Wang Fang, seeing her precious son being slapped, went crazy and lunged at Lin Fan. She scratched his face with her claws. Zhu Dayong grabbed a vase and charged at Lin Fan. When it came to causing a scene, they weren't afraid of anyone. After all, back in the village, Zhu Dayong and Wang Fang had earned a reputation for being unruly. But the next moment, Lin Fan lifted his foot and kicked Wang Fang out of the way, knocking Zhu Dayong down with her. Enough. Wu Meiling, who had been silent until now, finally spoke coldly. Lin Fan, stop making a scene. I had Secretary Li come to you to give you some dignity, and now you've only humiliated yourself. I know you're angry, but this world is harsh. You and I were never on the same level before, aren't we now, and will never be. Lin Fan's eyes were full of coldness. He was about to speak when Wu Meiling interrupted him. I know what you want to say. Wu Meiling tightly held onto Zhou Haoran, her eyes full of admiration. You want to tell me you love me, right? You want to beg me for another chance. But you're not worthy. I love Haoran, and once the Zhou family gets the Yuanhui Group's investment, my Wu family will rise even higher. Lin Fan looked at Wu Meiling's self-righteous arrogance, feeling disgusted. He sneered. You got the Yuanhui Group investment, huh? Rising higher, huh? I have to ask, is Liu Yuanhui, the richest man in Southern Province, blind? Saying that, Lin Fan pulled out his phone and dialed Liu Yuanhui's private number. Chapter 3. Ridiculous. Wu Meiling's eyes were filled with sarcasm. Don't even talk about your 3 years in prison. Even 3 years ago, you wouldn't have had the qualifications to get a call from the richest man Liu. Stop pretending. At this moment, Zhu Dayong had also gotten up from the ground. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and nearly roared. Are all your security team useless? Hurry up and get over here. At this moment, he seemed to have reverted to the good-for-nothing drunkard he used to be years ago. You ungrateful wretches. Since you don't appreciate the Zhou family's kindness, I'll have someone break your 2 dog legs today. Just then, Lin Fan's phone rang, and a respectful voice came through. Mr. Lin, how may I assist you? Zhu Dayong's ferocious expression immediately froze on his face. Zhu Haoran and Wang Fang's hearts also skipped a beat. But soon after, Wang Fang sneered sarcastically. Who are you trying to scare? You just find someone to pretend to be Liu, and now you think you're calling the richest man. If he's really Liu, then I'm Liu's mother. There was silence on the other end of the line. Lin Fan's voice came through coldly. Liu Yuanhui, has someone from the Zhou family reached out to you for investment? When Wu Meiling heard Lin Fan's words, she crossed her arms and coldly smiled. Keep pretending, Lin Fan. Right now, you're just a clown. Yes, that's true. Liu Yuanhui's voice still sounded respectful. A few days ago, someone from the Zhou family, someone effeminate, sent someone to my company. They cried and begged my assistant for half a day. Later, when I realized your relationship with the Zhou family, I agreed to invest 10 billion for them. When Zhu Haoran heard the word effeminate, his expression instantly turned ugly, and a bad premonition surged in his heart. Lin Fan's cold gaze swept over the people in front of him. They were still mocking him, but in his heart, he was sneering. What a bunch of ignorant fools. I'm severing all ties with the Zhou family from now on. Lin Fan said just one sentence before hanging up. He didn't even spare them another glance. One day, when these pests begged him, they would know what real despair felt like. As Lin Fan turned to leave, Wu Meiling sneered again and mocked. Really playing the part now, huh? According to your script, want the people from Yuanhui Group call immediately to cancel the investment. Zhu Dayong gritted his teeth and shouted. You ungrateful wretch. You hit my son and now want to run. Do you think you can escape? He then turned to the several security guards rushing over and cursed. A bunch of useless idiots. Grab this dog and break his 2 legs first. The security guards stared at Lin Fan, whose face was cold and stern. They all recognized him after all, it was Lin Fan who had bought the villa in the first place. On the day of the move, Lin Fan even gave each of them a big red envelope. Seeing the security guards hesitate, Zhou Daong glared at them. Useless. What are you afraid of? This dog just got out of prison. From now on, he has nothing to do with the Zhou family. Beat him to death. After you're done, I'll give each of you 10,000. The security guards exchanged glances, then immediately raised their batons and charged at Lin Fan. Lin Fan's gaze was as cold as ice. He kicked out suddenly. The security team leader, who was in the front, was sent flying several meters through the air, spitting a mouthful of blood in mid-flight. This caused the other security guards to freeze in place, terror-stricken. Sweat soaked through their uniforms. Lin Fan's ice-cold eyes swept over them. You make a few thousand a month, and you dare risk your life. The security guards trembled all over, quickly retreating a few steps and clearing a path. They were all terrified. The team leader weighed 160 pounds, trained in free combat, and yet he was kicked several meters away in one blow. Who the hell dared to stop him now? As Lin Fan's figure grew smaller, Zhou Daong rushed over in a fit of rage, picking up a baton and smashing it into the other security guards. Useless. A bunch of useless idiots. Damn it, chase him. Beat him to a pulp. The security guards, their faces full of anger, dared not offend Zhou Daong. They could only keep apologizing. At the gate of the villa, Zhu Hairan held Wu Meiling with his left hand and Wang Fan with his right, his face filled with guilt. His voice even choked slightly. Mom, Meiling, it's all my fault. I've made you suffer. Wang Fan looked at the slap mark on Zhu Hairan's face, her eyes full of pain. My good son, it's you who suffered. It's that dog Lin Fan's fault. No, 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 Zhu Hairan quickly waved his hand. Mom, please don't have anyone deal with him. I don't feel wronged. I've suffered a lot over the years. A slap isn't a big deal. The more Zhu Hairan said this, the deeper the hatred in Wang Fang's eyes grew. At this point, Wu Meiling coldly sneered and spoke. With the strength of our two families, killing him is as easy as crushing an ant. If he doesn't know his place, don't blame us for being ruthless. As soon as we let Yuanhui Group know that someone was pretending to be Liu Yuanhui, do you think he'll still be alive? Upon hearing this, Wang Fang's eyes lit up. She turned to look at Zhu Daong, who was coming back, about to speak, but saw him suddenly take out his phone and answer a call. The next moment, Zhu Daong froze in place, his whole body like a statue. His face went as pale as death. Seeing this, Wu Meiling's expression changed as well. She muttered in her heart, this is impossible. Zhu Hairan's voice trembled as he asked. Dad, what's going on? Seeing Zhu Daong standing there, silent, Wang Fang angrily rushed over, shaking him by the collar. Say something. What's going on? Zhu Daong's phone kept ringing. Messages kept coming in. Wang Fang grabbed the phone from him and looked at it, her whole body collapsing as she fell to the ground. Messages from Yuanhui Group stated that they were indeed cancelling the investment. Not only Yuanhui Group, but the companies that had partnerships with Zhou Group were also ending their collaborations. This can't be. This is absolutely impossible. Wang Fang screamed hysterically, smashing the phone to pieces. Wu Meiling panicked as well. She grabbed Zhu Hairan's arm and trembled. Hairan, hurry and go to Yuanhui Group to find out what's going on. Yes, yes. Wang Fang snapped out of it and quickly dragged Zhu Daong toward the garage. As the Zhu family trio drove off, Wu Meiling sat in her car. Her heart raced, and her hands trembled as she lit a cigarette, a bad premonition surging inside her. Remembering the cold look in Lin Fan's eyes before he left, she involuntarily shivered. Had she made a mistake? No, absolutely not. Lin Fan's previous success in business was purely luck. His personal value couldn't possibly compare to Zhou Group's current position. He had just been released from prison and couldn't possibly know Liu Yuanhui, the richest man in southern province. She was the daughter of the Wu family, the emperor's precious daughter. She couldn't be involved with a man who had been in prison. She couldn't let Lin Fan expose the truth about her role in his imprisonment, or her reputation would be ruined. With this thought in mind, Wu Meiling's eyes grew cold, and she quickly pulled out Lin Fan's number from her blacklist. But when she dialed it multiple times, it couldn't be reached. In the end, she gritted her teeth and sent several messages to Lin Fan. Lin Fan, what the hell are you doing? Answer me, are you pretending, or do you really know Liu Yuanhui? Speak up. Howren and I are just playing along. The purpose is to help you get your shares back. Really, I love you. The Wu family's business was revived thanks to you. You won't go against the Wu family, will you? I know you're angry because you still love me deeply. After sending these messages, Wu Meiling finished her cigarette. Seeing that Lin Fan still hadn't replied, she furiously slammed the steering wheel, gritting her teeth in anger. You dog, if this is just a coincidence, you're dead for sure. She dialed Secretary Li's number again, but it went unanswered. At that moment, her phone on the dashboard suddenly started ringing repeatedly. Messages about the cancellation of partnerships made Wu Meiling's face turn pale. Her mind went blank as she started the car and sped toward the company. Just as she was about to leave the Villard district, her phone rang again. Lin Fan finally replied to her message. Wu Meiling's face lit up as she quickly grabbed her phone and opened the message. F your mom. Get lost. You bitch. You're a whore. Go check for AIDS. Wu Meiling froze. Then, with a loud bang, her Bentley crashed into a tree by the roadside. The airbags deployed, and a jade pendant from the dashboard smashed into her head. Wu Meiling instantly lost consciousness. The jade pendant had Lin Fan's name engraved on it. Chapter 4. In a Rolls-Royce. Liu Yuanhui only felt that the temperature in the car had dropped to freezing point, and it was even difficult to breathe. After hesitating for a moment, he whispered, Mr. Lin, the Zhou family is not worthy of you. He had no idea how strong Lin Fan was. But Lin Fan's miraculous medical skills alone are enough to make countless bigwigs respect him. Even he, the richest man in Jiangnan province, was not worthy of asking Lin Fan for help. Fortunately, my daughter and Lin Fan were college classmates. Fortunately, his daughter helped Lin Fan when he was bullied. The Rolls-Royce turned an intersection and finally stopped downstairs of Zhou Group. Until now, a small Zhou family was not of much value to Lin Fan. With the financial resources and connections he has accumulated in the past 3 years, he can create a business group that is 100 or 1,000 times larger than the Zhou Group in a matter of minutes. But this is the company he built. He wanted to see what confidence the Zhou family had to kick him out. After getting off the bus, Lin Fan lit a cigarette and looked up again, his expression extremely cold. He had just taken 2 steps when his eyes suddenly glanced towards the security room. Through the glass, you can see several security guards pinning a young man to the ground, beating and kicking him. The sinister laugh could be heard clearly. You f-king think you're the vice president. You cripple, you can't tell the difference between the big boss and the small boss, right? You still dare to resist? Beat him? Damn it, beat him until he begs for mercy. Liu Yuanhui could clearly feel the chill emanating from Lin Fan. Although he didn't know what was going on, he still walked quickly to the door of the security room and shouted angrily. Stop. The security guards didn't even turn their heads and continued beating the young man covered in blood on the ground. There was only a burly bald man in a security uniform, smoking a cigarette and looking at Liu Yuanhui. He used his little finger to touch the gap between his gold teeth, narrowed his eyes and laughed and scolded. Who the hell are you? Are you trying to meddle in other people's business? Get lost and go somewhere cooler. As he spoke, he pulled aside a few security guards, spread his legs, and grinned at the young man with a bloody head on the ground. Crawl under my crotch and kowtow 3 times, and I'll let you go today. As soon as these words were spoken, several security guards burst into laughter. The young man lay on the ground, gasping for breath, with blood constantly flowing out of his mouth and nose. There seemed to be anger bursting out of his eyes, but his teeth were clenched and he said nothing. Liu Yuanhui frowned and walked into the security room. But the next moment, he was pulled away by Lin Fan. Bang! The door of the security room was slammed shut. Immediately afterwards, there was a violent collision and a series of shrill screams. Help! Help! A security guard broke open the door and rushed out. His face was pale and he tried to escape by rolling and crawling. But a hand suddenly reached out from behind, grabbed his hair and pulled it back. Then there were 2 more shrill screams. Liu Yuanhui felt his scalp tingling after hearing this. He saw that the security room was in a mess. Several security guards were huddled on the ground, their hands and feet twisted into strange shapes, twitching in pain. They looked at Lin Fan with deep fear, as if they were looking at a devil. The bald man who was the security captain was kneeling in front of Lin Fan. He was trembling all over and cold sweat kept coming out of his bald head. His mouth full of gold teeth chattered with fear. Just now, he saw with his own eyes this devil in front of him cruelly breaking the hands and feet of several of his companions, and then kicking them around like balls. Even the walls were covered with dense cracks. Big brother, the bald man clasped his fists towards Lin Fan with a look of horror on his face, his voice already filled with tears. I don't think I have ever offended you. Bang! Lin Fan raised his hand and slapped him. The bald man was beaten to the ground, half of his face was covered in blood, and his mouth full of gold teeth were flying everywhere. Lin Fan looked at the young man who was helped up by Liu Yuanhui, and after a few seconds of silence, he asked, "Can you walk?" Tang Feng's face was covered in blood, but he was grinning at this moment. As he laughed, tears welled up in his eyes. He nodded and choked up. "Able." Lin Fan lit a new cigarette, put it to Tang Feng's mouth, then turned and walked towards the building. Liu Yuanhui supported the young man and followed behind. The bald man covered his face, stumbled out of the security room and ran in the opposite direction. The next moment, a lighter flew over and hit the bald man's head, exploding with a bang. The bald man fell to the ground with a scream, covering his head and rolling around in excruciating pain. In the elevator, a middle-aged man who was on the phone suddenly widened his eyes when he saw Lin Fan come in. The cell phone also slipped from his hand and fell heavily to the ground. The middle-aged man didn't come back to his senses until Lin Fan and the other two walked out of the elevator. After a long while, he picked up his phone and sent a big message in the internal group. "Mr. Lin is back." For a moment, the company corridor was crowded with people, and everyone was talking about this matter. At the door of the chairman's office, dozens of senior executives stood in silence, not daring to breathe. Lin Fan came out of the elevator without even looking at them. An executive quickly pushed open the office door. Lin Fan walked in expressionlessly. In the office, a woman in her 20s was lying on the sofa, smoking and playing with her cell phone. Hearing the footsteps, her face lit up, she put her cigarette in the ashtray, turned her head and said coquettishly, "Brother Howren, why did you come just now? I've been waiting for you for so long." Before she could finish her words, the woman's smile froze on her face. "Who the hell are you?" She stood up, glared at Lin Fan and cursed, "This is the chairman's office, get out right now, you unruly person." Lin Fan didn't even look at her, he coldly said, "Get out," and then sat down in the boss chair. The woman was stunned, as if she had heard a joke. "You dare to ask me to get out? I'm Mr. Zhou's secretary. Believe it or not, I can get you out of the Zhou group with just one sentence." Outside the door, a group of executives looked unhappy. One of them quickly ran into the office and slapped the woman twice in the face. The woman was stunned for a moment. "Wang Jingming, are you fucking crazy to dare to hit me?" Wang Jingming's face was gloomy and he slapped the woman in the face again. Then he dragged the woman out of the office. In the office, Lin Fan asked Liu Yuanhui to help Tang Feng sit down on the sofa. He pointed his finger at Tang Feng's chest, and Tang Feng suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood, and his expression finally relaxed a little. "What happened to your legs?" Tang Feng shook his head, "It was an accident." Lin Fan's eyes were stern. "I asked you what's wrong." Tang Feng closed his eyes and still shook his head. "Brother, don't worry about this matter, I can handle it." Lin Fan was so angry that he shouted coldly to the outside, "Someone come in." Wang Jingming walked in immediately and respectfully called out, "General Lin." Lin Fan pointed at Tang Feng expressionlessly. Wang Jingming sighed with a complicated look. 3 years ago, after you, Mr. Lin, were imprisoned, public opinion seriously affected the company's operations. It was Vice President Tang who led us through one difficulty after another. But half a year ago, your father suddenly brought your brother to the company and brought your share transfer agreement. On the same day, he dismissed Vice President Tang from his position and told us that you had died in prison. A full half hour. By the time Wang Jingming finished speaking, Lin Fan's face had become frighteningly cold. Tang Feng didn't believe that he was dead, and repeatedly found Zhu Dayong and Zhu Howren to question them. Then someone broke his right leg and forced him to stay in Zhu group as a security guard, otherwise they would attack his parents. And that group of security guards were also arranged by Zhu Howren after he took office. "You bastard." Lin Fan slapped the desk. leaving a deep palm print. Wang Jingming's pupils shrank sharply when he saw this scene. Over the years, Lin Fan has been investigating Zhou Hairen's whereabouts. Tang Feng also put a lot of effort into this. After Lin Fan was imprisoned, if Tang Feng had not continued his investigation, Zhou Hairen would still be just a duck for people's entertainment in some club. That's right, a duck. The anger in Lin Fan's heart surged again. Why didn't I see the ugly faces of the Zhou family before? Thinking of this, a fierce look flashed across Lin Fan's face. Everyone, come in. A group of executives hurried into the office and looked at Lin Fan respectfully. Lin Fan lit a cigarette and said expressionlessly, I recruited each of you personally, so I won't waste any more time talking nonsense. I have severed ties with the Zhou family. If you wish to stay, you may do so. If you wish to follow me, you are welcome. Give me an answer after this cigarette. Chapter 5. A group of senior executives had mixed feelings. When they were talented but not appreciated and were in dire straits, it was Lin Fan who recognized their talents and provided them with a platform to display their abilities. But now, can Lin Fan, who has left the Zhou family and lost everything, really make a comeback? Can the Zhou family really allow Lin Fan to turn things around? HR manager Wang Jingming gritted his teeth and said, Boss Lin, if it weren't for you, I would have jumped into the river and committed suicide 6 years ago. I'm going to fight you. That's right. A man next to him said unhappily, I don't want to stay here any longer. Not only do you cut my salary, but you don't even give us any respect. And me, senior brother Lin, you were my idol when I was in college. I only recognize you, not Zhou. For a while, no one chose to stay in Zhou's company. Lin Fan could see the sadness in the eyes of several of them and said calmly, Since you have decided, then listen carefully to what I have to say next. I am angry. These 4 words immediately made everyone's faces turn pale. You all saw clearly how much Tang Feng suffered. Who helped him? One sentence made everyone feel extremely guilty. Tang Feng shook his head and sighed. He stood up and limped to Lin Fan's side. Brother, I was the one who told them not to interfere. Otherwise, it wouldn't just be my legs that would be broken. It wouldn't just be my family that would be threatened. I always believe that you will come back one day. Tang Feng's eyes were firm. I have been waiting for you to come back and lead us to a comeback. Liu Yuanhui, who was standing next to him, had a glimmer of envy in his eyes. He is the richest man in Jiangnan province and a nationally renowned entrepreneur. But even he does not have such strong cohesion and personal charm within the group. After listening to Tang Feng's explanation, Lin Fan's expression eased a little. He nodded, then took out a black bank card and handed it to Tang Feng. There are 2 billion in the card as the startup capital for the new company. Upon hearing this, everyone present, except Chen Yuanhui, widened their eyes. 2 billion. Lin Fan had been in prison for 3 years, and all of his shares and properties had been transferred to his name by the Zhou family. He should be penniless, so where did the 2 billion come from? When Chen Yuanhui saw these people's reactions, he couldn't help but feel emotional. 2 billion is nothing. On the day of his release, the group of big shots secretly detained in Nanjie prison prepared a whole box of bank cards, which was worth over 100 billion yuan at least, but Lin Fan didn't take a single cent. Not to mention that inviting Lin Fan to see the patient would cost a starting price of 100 million. Before everyone could come to their senses, a scolding voice rang out at the office door. What are you all doing here? It's work time. Get out of here. Damn it, my words as the vice president are not effective, right? Believe it or not, I'm going to call Jay Cho right now. At the office door, a young man in a suit put his left hand in his pocket and pointed at a group of executives with his right hand and cursed. A group of executives turned around and looked at this man coldly. There was anger in many people's eyes. Seeing that no one was paying attention to him, the young man cursed, pushed the crowd away, and shouted, Hairen, I think it's time to replace this group of people. Halfway through his words, he saw Lin Fan sitting in the boss chair. Who the hell are you? Do you know where this is? How dare you sit in my brother's seat? Seeing Lin Fan looking at him coldly, the young man shuddered subconsciously, and his eyes immediately fell on Tang Feng, who was covered in blood. Tang Feng, who the hell let you in? Go back to the security room. However, Tang Feng just looked at him coldly without saying a word. You want to rebel, right? Fine, I'll call Hairen right now and have him fire all of you. The young man was as angry as a clown. He took out his cell phone and was about to make a call, completely unaware that Lin Fan had stood up. The next moment. Bang! The man's body flew backwards instantly. He curled up on the ground, holding his stomach, rolling on the ground in pain, but still cursing recklessly. Tang Feng glanced at this person coldly and said to Lin Fan, "Brother, before Zhou Haren was found, he was a young master in the Jinhai Club. This man was called Yuan Hua, and he was also a duck." Lin Fan sneered in his heart. Zhou Haren is a dud, and he found another dud to replace Tang Feng as vice president. No wonder the Zhou group has been suffering huge losses recently. If it weren't for the fortune he had built up, the Zhou family would have gone bankrupt long ago. Retracting his gaze, Lin Fan threw away the cigarette but in his hand and walked out the door. Liu Yuanhui supported Tang Feng and followed closely behind. The other executives also straightened their backs with bright smiles on their faces. Yuan Hua got up, holding his stomach, and staggered to the floor-to-ceiling window while cursing. Then he saw nearly 1,000 people from the Zhou group, from senior executives to ordinary employees, all ran out of the building cheering. In the blink of an eye, the building was empty, leaving only the trampled work badges on the ground. Yuan Hua finally came to his senses, ran over to pick up the phone, and dialed the number in a panic. In front of Yuan Hui group. Zhou Haren got off the car in a hurry and had just taken a few steps when his cell phone rang like a life-threatening call. As soon as the call was connected, I heard Yuan Hua's trembling voice. "Haren, it's bad, everyone in the company has run away. Where are you? Come quickly and take a look." Zhou Haren was stunned on the spot for a moment. Yuan Hui Group stopped investing, and other companies cancelled their cooperation with Zhou. Now even the company is deserted. Then wouldn't the shares in my hands be worthless? Seeing Zhou Haren standing there in a daze, Zhu Dayong immediately became anxious. "Haren, hurry up, let's go ask Liu Yuanhui, the richest man in the country. Don't you think he appreciates you very much?" Wang Fan was so anxious that she kept stamping her feet. "What are you standing there for? Do you really believe that the unlucky star has such great power? That bastard got Liu Shoufu's phone number from somewhere and angered him. We are implicated by him." After yelling this, Wang Fang ran back and grabbed Zhou Haren, saying earnestly, "My dear son, as long as we tell Mr. Liu that we have severed our relationship with that unlucky person, Mr. Liu will definitely continue to invest, and those fence-sitting companies will definitely continue to cooperate with us." Zhu Dayong also came over and patted Zhou Haren on the shoulder. "You are a graduate student, and that unlucky guy only has an undergraduate degree. As long as you get the investment back, Jews will surely flourish in your hands, and we will always be the best. You can't let my parents live a hard life." Zhou Haren's head was buzzing. It took him a long time to come back to his senses. "Yes. I must get my investment back. I don't want to live a hard life anymore." Zhou Haren's eyes turned red and he walked quickly towards the reception hall of Yuanhui building. Wang Fang and Zhu Dayong hurriedly followed. "Excuse me, who are you three looking for?" The woman in charge of reception at the front desk asked politely. Zhou Haren took a deep breath. "I'm looking for Assistant Liang Yongliang. My name is Zhou Haren. I came to discuss cooperation a few days ago." "Zhou Haren?" The girl repeated, smiling and asked, "Is it Zhou Haren from Zhou Pharmaceutical Group?" Before Zhou Haren could say anything, Wang Fang shouted impatiently. "What nonsense! Since you know who we are, take us to see Assistant Liang." "No, take us directly to see the richest man Liu." The girl smiled and nodded. "Please wait, I'll make a call." Zhou Haren finally breathed a sigh of relief, but he was still somewhat dissatisfied with Wang Fang. "This is Yuanhui Group. Yelling and yelling here is just courting death, isn't it? And you went directly to see Mr. Rich Man Liu. Do you think you can see Mr. Rich Man Liu whenever you want?" Thinking of this, Zhou Haren disliked Wang Fang even more. At this moment, a tall and thin middle-aged man walked out of the elevator with several security guards. Seeing the middle-aged man, Zhou Haren hurriedly went up to him with a flattering smile on his face. "Assistant Liang, I'm Zhou Haren, do you still remember me?" Liang Yong's eyes were cold, and he ignored Zhou Haren and looked at Wang Fang, snorting coldly. "You're the only one who wants to be our chairman's mother." This one sentence made Wang Fang stand there in a daze. But then she glared and cursed. "When did I say this? Are you slandering me? Believe it or not, I will tear your mouth apart. Hearing this, Zhou Haoren's face turned pale. Liang Yong is Liu Yuanhui's most trusted assistant. If you offend him, everything will be over. Zhou Haoren hurried forward, pulled Wang Fang away, and said to Liang Yong with an apologetic smile. Assistant Liang, it's a misunderstanding. Our family has great respect for Mr. Liu. My mother has never said such a thing. Liang Yong's eyes became even colder, and he kicked Zhou Haoren to the ground. Beat them. Especially this woman. Ask her whose mother she is. Chapter 6. The screams of the three Zhou family members echoed throughout the first floor hall. The security guards didn't care who the three people in front of them were. If you dare to speak rudely to the chairman, you will have to pay the price. Zhu Dayong used to be a brave and aggressive person in the village. He wanted to resist at first, but after being hit twice, he fell to the ground and cried, "Ouch, ouch." When Wang Fang saw this, she pounced on him with her teeth and claws bared, but was slapped in the face and saw stars. She sat down on the ground, slapping her thighs and crying. God damn it, you bastards, come here, come and see, the lackeys of Yuanhui group are beating people up. Seeing that things were getting out of hand, Zhou Haoren looked at Liang Yong anxiously. He was about to speak when he was kicked hard in the stomach and fell to the ground in a daze. At this moment, he finally remembered Lin Fan's previous phone call. Could it be that the prisoner Lin Fan really knew the richest man Liu? Thinking of this possibility, Zhou Haoren didn't care about his parents, and rushed over to hug Liang Yong's thighs. Assistant Liang, do you know Lin Fan? Call Mr. Liu and tell him that Lin Fan is my second brother. Seeing Liang Yong's indifference, Zhou Haoren's eyes suddenly turned red, and he choked up pitifully. Assistant Liang, please help me. My Zhou family will definitely remember your kindness. I promise. Liang Yong didn't want to hear Zhou Haoren crying at all. With just a look from him, several security guards dragged and finally threw the three members of the Zhou family out. Wang Fang got up from the ground, put her hands on her waist and cursed. You are a bunch of bastards, inferior people who can't even afford to eat for dishes in your lifetime. If you dare to hit me, I will curse your ancestors for 18 generations. Zhu Dayong's face was bruised and swollen, and he stared at Zhou Haoren and questioned. What's wrong with you? Didn't you say that Mr. Liu admires you? Call Mr. Liu, call him now. Damn it, a bunch of stinky security guards dared to hit me. When I was young, I would have smashed their dog heads. Zhou Haoren's face was gloomy. He stared at his parents, his heart heaving with anger. If they hadn't followed us, things wouldn't have gotten so awkward. I'm afraid you can forget about investing in Yuanhui Group. At this moment, a pink van stopped at the entrance of Yuanhui building. A young woman in a pink sweatshirt got out of the car. Several security guards quickly greeted with a smile. Miss. The woman glanced at Zhou Haoren and the other two, as if asking something. Not far away, Zhou Haoren heard the word young lady and saw the other person's delicate face, and he immediately had an idea in his mind. He supported Zhu Dayong and Wang Fang and deliberately raised his voice. Dad, Mom, I'll take you back first. I will definitely resolve this misunderstanding. After saying this, he deliberately glanced towards the entrance of the building. She also did not forget to show off her self-proclaimed perfect profile. But there was no one at the entrance of the building. After getting in the car, Zhou Haoren's face became gloomy again. He stepped on the accelerator and the car rushed out immediately. Haoren, go to the hospital. Wang Fang slapped her thigh in anger. I'm afraid your father's ribs are broken. Zhu Dayong also gritted his teeth and cursed. This matter is not over yet. Who the hell is that Liang? He is just an assistant, but he dared to let people beat us up. Haoren, call the richest man Liu and ask him to fire Liang. Zhou Haoren almost couldn't hold back from cursing. Liang Yong is indeed just an assistant, but he is Liu Yuanhui's assistant. Doesn't he see that he acts like a grandson in front of Liang Yong? How could I have such stupid parents? Once I get their shares, I will sever ties with them. Otherwise, I will be implicated by them sooner or later. Yunshan First Hospital. Zhou Haoren glanced at Zhu Dayong and Wang Fang who got off the car. Dad, Mom, you go get checked first. I'll go to the company first. Wang Fang and Zhu Dayong didn't know that the company was deserted. When they saw Zhou Haoren was about to leave, they quickly reached out to grab him. Haoren, your father and I don't know how to check. When we came to the hospital before, Lin Fan was the one running around. Before she could finish her words, Wang Fang saw that Zhou Haoren's face looked strange and she quickly shut her mouth. Zhou Haoren suppressed his anger, took the two people to register and left. Seeing him driving away, Zhu Dayong and Wang Fang were suddenly at a loss. A nurse happened to pass by, and Wang Fang grabbed her and said, "We'll do the checkup, you take us there." The nurse frowned slightly, but still took the two people upstairs to the corresponding department. Seeing that she was about to leave, Wang Fang quickly grabbed the girl's arm and said rudely, "We don't understand, so just stay here with us." There was a flash of displeasure in the young nurse's eyes, and before she could explain, Wang Fang got angry first. She was already holding her breath, and now seeing that the young nurse was a little impatient, she immediately took out all her anger on her. "What's that look in your eyes? You do things like carrying shit and urine for others, aren't you serving us?" This shrill voice immediately attracted a lot of contemptuous looks. Wang Fang stared and continued to yell, "What are you looking at? I'm not short of money." As she spoke, she pulled out a wad of cash from her bag and threw it directly at the nurse's face. "Just stand here and don't go anywhere." Just at this moment, Wu Mailing, wearing a hospital gown, came out of the examination room. Seeing Zhu Dayong and Wang Fang, a hint of doubt flashed across her eyes. "Uncle and aunt, didn't you go to Yuanhui Group? Why are you here?" Seeing Wu Mailing, Wang Fang was also stunned. She pushed the tearful nurse away, picked up the money, and then walked up to Wu Mailing with Zhu Dayong. Wu Mailing knows what kind of people Zhu Dayong and Wang Fang are. Seeing the contentious looks coming from all around, he suddenly felt a little embarrassed and quickly took the two of them to a corner. After listening to Wang Fang's story about what happened in Yuanhui Group, Wu Mailing was stunned. Then the investment of Yuanhui Group can never be recovered. Impossible. Zhu Dayong said in a muffled voice, "Haoren is a graduate student. Mr. Liu is very optimistic about him. It was that Liang who did it. I suspect that the ungrateful bastard Lin Fan and Liang had colluded long ago." Wang Fang quickly pulled Wu Mailing over and gnashed her teeth as she echoed, "You also said that I want to be the mother of Liu, the richest man. When did I ever say that? If this isn't slander, what is it?" Wu Mailing frowned, and a hint of barely perceptible disdain flashed across her eyes. After sending the two to the examination room, she immediately called Zhu Haoren. "Haoren, does Lin Fan really know Mr. Liu?" Zhu Haoren's gentle voice came from the phone. "Mailing, don't be afraid. Mr. Liu is a mysterious figure who is hard to find. Not many people have seen him. My second brother was just released from prison. It's impossible for him to know Mr. Liu." After hanging up the phone, Wu Mailing breathed a sigh of relief. A hint of coldness flashed across her eyes, and she murmured in a low voice, "Idiot. The Zhou family has already severed ties with Lin Fan, yet you still call him second brother? You are such a hopeless case. She doesn't really like Zhu Haoren. Whether it was Lin Fan in the past or Zhu Haoren now, in her eyes they were just tools to be used. Once she marries Zhu Haoren and helps that idiot Zhu Haoren get all of Zhu's shares, she will have 10,000 ways to control Zhu." Just as she was thinking this, she suddenly felt a needle-like pain in her head and her vision became blurry. A male doctor walked over quickly and handed the examination report to Wu Mailing with a serious expression. "Ms. Wu, the situation is not good. The car accident seems to have damaged your eyesight and may cause blindness." Wu Mailing trembled and her face turned pale. What did you say? Blind?" The doctor nodded heavily. "Our medical equipment cannot detect the specific damage point." After a few seconds of silence, he spoke very seriously. "I suggest you see a Chinese doctor." Chapter 7. When Zhu Dayong and Wang Fang came out of the examination room, they found that Wu Mailing was missing. Wang Fang was so angry that she cursed, "You have no conscience." She looked at Zhu Dayong who was holding his stomach and asked in a low voice, "Do you think she is still thinking about that unlucky Lin Fan?" Zhu Dayong's face darkened. If the Wu family supports him, maybe that jinx can really make a comeback. Wang Fang's face suddenly showed a trace of panic, and her eyes became fierce. "That won't do. She can only marry Haoren, and the Wu family's assets can only belong to us. Let's go find her and ask her clearly." After the two men acted like scoundrels again, they finally forced a young nurse to take them to the VIP ward where Wu Mailing was. But at this time, Wu Mailing was lying on the hospital bed, her face was pale, and she seemed to have lost her soul. "Oh, Mailing, what happened?" Wang Fang walked forward with a distressed look on her face and held Wu Mailing's hand. Just by being careless, she touched the infusion needle, and Wu Meiling screamed in pain. A hint of pride flashed in Wang Fang's eyes. You deserve it for not waiting for us to check. If we don't seize the opportunity now, won't there be a big uproar after we marry you? There was a flash of disgust in Wu Meiling's eyes, but a somewhat ugly smile appeared on her face. It was a minor car accident. It's okay. Auntie, don't worry. Zhu Deong winked, and Wang Fang coughed and immediately asked tentatively. Meiling, let me tell you, even though Lin Fan is back now, he is nothing compared to our Haren. You must not be sentimental. As she spoke, she caught a glimpse of the jade pendant beside the pillow, and a hint of disgust suddenly appeared in her eyes. Isn't this the stuff of that unlucky Lin Fan? Why are you keeping it? Wang Fang grabbed the jade pendant and smashed it on the ground. What bad luck. You kept this thing. No wonder you had a car accident. Just at this moment, a figure walked to the door of the ward. Seeing the jade pendant thrown on the ground, the visitor's calm eyes suddenly turned cold. Pick it up. Lin Fan's cold voice made Wang Fang and Zhu Deong tremble all over. But the next moment, Zhu Deong picked up a stool and pretended to smash it at Lin Fan. He had been beaten up in Yuan Hui group and was already feeling angry. When he saw Lin Fan at this moment, how could he hold back his anger? However, Lin Fan just slapped the stool and it broke into pieces. Zhu Deong also stumbled and hit the wall, and immediately cursed in pain. You beast, I raised you for so many years, and you dare to hit me. Lin Fan didn't even look at Zhu Deong, he walked up to Wang Fang and spoke again. I told you to pick it up. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly. When Wang Fang saw Lin Fan's horrified look, she subconsciously bent down and picked up the jade pendant. But she reacted the next moment and pretended to throw the jade pendant out of the window again. Lin Fan reached out and grabbed the jade pendant, followed by a loud slap in the face. Bang! The slap made Wang Fang's head buzz. After making sure that the jade pendant was intact, Lin Fan turned and left. When he was abandoned at the door of the police station, he only had this jade pendant on him, and it was also the only clue to investigate his life experience. Before going to prison, he gave it to Wu Meiling for safekeeping. Now that the relationship has been severed, it is natural to take the things back. Lin Fan had already walked out of the ward, but Wang Fang rushed to the door like crazy, pointing at Lin Fan's back and yelling. I'm not done with you. Without our Zhou family, you'd be nothing more than a homeless stray dog. On the hospital bed, Wu Meiling looked a little lost. From beginning to end, Lin Fan didn't even look at her. Although she has always treated Lin Fan as a tool, she is quite confident in her own charm. In her opinion, even if she abandoned Lin Fan should cry and beg her to get back together. She is a natural queen, and people like Lin Fan should be her lapdogs. But now, her arrogance seemed to be thrown to the ground by Lin Fan, and stepped on hard a few times. For a moment, the viciousness in Wu Meiling's eyes became even more intense. She swore in her heart that she would trample Lin Fan under her feet. Wang Fan was so angry that she was shaking all over. Being beaten continuously within one day is a great shame for her current status. She cursed and took out her cell phone. I'm going to call Haren now. I will never let this bastard off. However, Zhu Haren was standing downstairs of Zhou Pharmaceutical at this time, roaring like crazy. What the hell is going on? With red eyes, he threw his wrinkled-off white suit to the ground and grabbed Yuan Hui by the collar. Where the hell are all those people? Yuan Hui quickly recounted what had happened. After hearing that it was Lin Fan who took away all the company's executives and employees, Zhu Haren was so angry that he kicked Yuan Hui to the ground. Yuan Hui got up and urged, Haren, you should call Brother Xiong right away. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a dozen vans brake to a stop nearby. A bald man with several layers of gauze wrapped around his head rushed over with hundreds of people. Where are the people? Where are the fucking people? When Zhu Haren saw the bald man, he became furious and punched him in the face. Beating and scolding. What the hell are you doing? You just watched people from the company being taken away. What's the use of you bunch of trash? The bald man's face was covered in blood after being beaten, but he didn't dare to fight back at all, only a hint of ferocity flashed in his eyes. Perhaps he was tired of calling. Zhu Haren took out his cell phone and saw that Wang Fan was calling him, and he became annoyed again. He hung up the phone and took out Lin Fan's photo from the album. Look carefully. His name is Lin Fan. Find him within 3 days. Do you want me to teach you what to do? Zhou Hairan slapped the bald man in the face again, then turned around cursing and left with Yuan Hua. Staring at the car going away, the bald man spat out a mouthful of blood, his eyes becoming even more vicious. Damn it, you dead duck. If you hadn't been reborn into a good family, you would have been able to climb over my head. A yellow-haired guy also sneered. Brother Guang, let's be patient. Didn't Brother Xiong say that once this guy gets all the shares of the Zhou family, he will be killed immediately? The bald man had a gloomy face, lit a cigarette and said coldly. Send the photos to the brothers. Even if we have to turn Yinshan City upside down, we must find the man with the surname Lin. Just 2 hours later. The bald man received news that someone saw Lin Fan near Yunlong Villa. He immediately led hundreds of people to Yunlong Villa. Yunlong Villa. One of the most mysterious places in Yunshan City. No one knows who built it. No one knows who lives here. At this time, in the best located villa in Yunlong Villa, Liu Yuanhui looked at Lin Fan with a smile. Mr. Lin, there are only a dozen villas in this villa, and they are all very far apart. The owners of the other villas are either abroad or only come to live here once every few years. Usually no one disturbs them. Lin Fan nodded. 300 million, I'll transfer it to you later. Don't do that. Liu Yuanhui quickly waved his hand. Mr. Lin, although you treated my daughter for her sake, I, as a father, should also express my gratitude. As they were talking, a small pink van stopped next to the fountain outside. Dad. I'm coming. A clear female voice sounded, filled with excitement and excitement. Liu Qingye trotted into the villa, and once her eyes fell on Lin Fan, she couldn't take them away. Lin Fan. You're really back. She trotted forward, but then slowed down her pace and held out her hand to Lin Fan in a graceful manner. Long time no see, junior brother. Lin Fan smiled slightly and stretched out his hand to shake hands with Liu Qingye. Haven't seen you for a long time. He still remembered that not long after he entered college as a freshman, he was bullied a lot because he was poor and wore tattered clothes. It was the girl in front of him who stood up for him and helped him go to the school hospital. In the following years, every time they met at school, Liu Qingye would smile and wave to say hello. It's still the same sentence, long time no see, junior brother. But at that time, no one knew that she was the apple of the eye of Liu Yuanhui, the richest man in southern province. Seeing how familiar his daughter was with Lin Fan, Liu Yuanhui felt a little envious. However, since his daughter and Lin Fan were of the same generation, he did not dare to act like an elder. Xieya, why are you here? Liu Qingye smiled brightly. Dad, I feel a little unwell, I came to ask my junior brother to take a look at me. As soon as these words came out, Lin Fan frowned instantly. He couldn't see anything wrong with Liu Qingye's body. Liu Qingye smiled, stretched out her jade white fingers, and tapped Lin Fan's shoulder. I'm kidding, great doctor. I was unconscious when you treated me last time. I have to thank you in person. As she spoke, she pointed to the pink van outside. Come on, senior sister will take you to a feast. Liu Yuanhui glanced at the time and said softly, Yes, Mr. Lin, you haven't eaten for a day. Without waiting for Lin Fan to speak, Liu Qingye pulled him out. You're still being polite to my senior sister. Let's go. I've already reserved a seat. When Liu Yuanhui saw this scene, he also smiled knowingly. Suddenly, he thought of something. Lin Fan broke up with that Wu Ling and is still single. If it were my daughter. Thinking of this, Liu Yuanhui suddenly became excited. If my daughter could marry Lin Fan, she would definitely be happy in this life. He quickened his pace, intending to ask his daughter privately about her attitude towards Lin Fan. Just as I walked to the pink van, the car rushed out. Liu Yuanhui. Hey, my dear daughter, I'm not in the car yet. Chapter 8. Liu Qingye's pink minivan only has 2 seats. There was originally a pink rabbit on the passenger seat, and Lin Fan wanted to put it in the back. But when I looked back, the back was already filled with all kinds of pink dolls. He had no choice but to hold the rabbit in his arms. Liu Qingye was driving very attentively, constantly looking left and right at the rearview mirror. But his eyes would occasionally glance at Lin Fan's face, and he thought to himself. When did Lin Fan become so handsome? The facial features are more distinct than when he was in college, and his eyes are deeper. Especially the mysterious aura on her body, which makes people unable to take their eyes away. Careful! Lin Fan suddenly shouted loudly and reached out to grab Liu Qingye. Immediately afterwards, the car made a loud bang sound, spun and hit a lamppost, then barely came to a stop. Liu Qingya looked pale. As soon as I looked up, I saw hundreds of people surrounding me with steel pipes and machetes. Seeing the bald man in the lead, Lin Fan's face darkened. He stuffed the rabbit doll into Liu Qingya's arms, kicked open the deformed car door, got out of the car and stared at the bald man coldly. Boy, you're pretty good at fighting, right? Pretty awesome, right? The bald man held a cigarette in his mouth and pointed the machete in his hand at Lin Fan, his eyes full of hatred. He had a bruised face and a bandage on his head, which made him look even more ferocious. Come on, show me how awesome you are. Hundreds of people surrounded Lin Fan and Liu Qingya's pink minivan. One of them was shirtless and had tattoos on his face. He was leaning on the car window and whistling at Liu Qingya with a lewd smile on his face. Wow, this chick is pretty. As he said this, he did not forget to look at the bald man. Brother Guang, you are blessed tonight. Don't forget your brothers when the time comes. You eat the meat, and we'll try the soup tilder. As soon as these words were spoken, the group of hooligans present burst into laughter. Liu Qingya is not someone who will allow herself to be teased by anyone. She pushed the car door hard, causing the yellow-haired man to fall backwards, covering his nose and backing away repeatedly. What do you want to do? Get out of here now, or I'll call the police. The yellow-haired man wiped the blood from his nose and reached out to grab Liu Qingya, who had just got off the car. However, as soon as he stretched out his hand, he saw a shadow blocking his way. Before the yellow-haired man could react, Lin Fan grabbed his wrist. Bang! Lin Fan kicked the yellow-haired guy hard in the stomach. The yellow-haired man's feet were kicked off the ground in an instant, and he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Lin Fan shook his wrist, and the yellow-haired man fell heavily to the ground with a bang. The right hand that was caught by Lin Fan was twisted into a pretzel. This scene made the surrounding gangsters feel their scalps tingle and they subconsciously took a few steps back. The yellow-haired man lay on the ground, blood gushing out of his mouth and nose. He twitched a few times and then fainted. The bald man couldn't help but tremble in his legs at this time. But when he thought about the hundreds of brothers he brought with him, he seemed to gain confidence again. His eyes turned fierce, and he gritted his teeth and cursed. Come on, I'm here. Destroy him first. The people under his command are all veterans in fighting. But two fists cannot beat four hands. A hero cannot defeat a large number of people. He just doesn't believe that Lin Fan can rebel. Beat. Damn it, cut him. Get out of the way, I'm coming. Hundreds of people swarmed towards Lin Fan, each one more powerful than the last. Steel pipes and machetes were all aimed at Lin Fan. The indifference in Lin Fan's eyes turned into a strong murderous intent at this moment. He suddenly reached out, grabbed a steel pipe, and with a few simple sweeps, he hit more than a dozen people, causing them to bleed and cry for their parents. This group of people couldn't even see Lin Fan's figure clearly. They only saw people around them falling down one after another, with screams coming one after another. The bald man who had climbed onto the roof of the car to watch the fight was trembling all over, and he screamed with bloodshot eyes. Damn it! Left! On the left! Right, who's he? He's on your right! Seeing his men falling down in a row, the bald man became anxious and cursed. They are all a bunch of fucking losers. What the hell is that womanizing? Kill him for me. As soon as he finished speaking, the bald man's pupils shrank sharply. Because he saw that the last person he brought was swung 2 or 3 meters away by Lin Fan's stick, and fell to the ground in excruciating pain. And Lin Fan's gaze had already fallen on him. The bald man's legs were shaking even more violently, and it felt like an electric current was running through his body. His crotch felt hot and he actually peed his pants on the spot out of fright. He turned around and was about to run, but forgot he was still on the roof of the car and fell flat on his face. Before he could get up, Lin Fan had already stepped on his head. Bang! The bald man's already swollen face fell heavily to the ground. The murderous intent in Lin Fan's eyes grew stronger, and his feet began to move. The bald man immediately let out a shrill scream, and his entire face was rubbed with blood. Brother, we can talk it out, Spare my life, spare my life. There was already a tone of crying in the bald man's voice. He has been following Brother Xiong for nearly 20 years. When anyone mentions Brother Guang's name in Yunshan City, everyone will say, he's a ruthless guy. But now, he knows what a real ruthless person is. Brother, oh no, brother. Listen to me, I am hanging out with Brother Xiong. Lin Fan raised his foot and kicked the bald man, causing him to roll several meters away. Hearing him mention Brother Xiong, Lin Fan asked coldly. Are you talking about Zhang Xiong? Zhang Xiong, nicknamed Scar Xiong, has been in the business for more than 20 years but has not made a name for himself. He used to just run an entertainment club. 4 years ago, Lin Fan took that bitch Wu Meiling there once. Zhang Xiong received him personally, saying repeatedly that these years had not been easy, and begged Lin Fan to give him a chance for development, saying that he was willing to serve Lin Fan wholeheartedly in the future. Under the persuasion of that bitch Wu Meiling, Lin Fan gave Zhang Xiong 20 million, which allowed him to have where he is today. Har har, they are all such heartless people. Seeing that Lin Fan didn't say anything, the bald man thought that Lin Fan was afraid. He trembled and climbed up, grinning, and was about to say something, but was kicked back by Lin Fan again. Tell Scar Xiong to clean his neck and wait for me. After saying that, Lin Fan turned around and walked to Liu Qingya, frowned and looked at the severely deformed pink van, wondering if it could still be driven. Liu Qingya pursed her lips and stared at Lin Fan's chiseled face, still not recovering from her shock. He only knew that his junior fellow apprentice was a business genius. It was surprising enough to know that it was he who cured my illness, but I never thought that he could fight so well. At this time, Liu Yuanhui drove the Rolls-Royce slowly to a stop. Seeing the hooligans rolling and screaming on the ground, he looked at Lin Fan and Liu Qingya in astonishment. Mr. Lin, are you okay? How come this happened while he was just going to the toilet? Seeing the unconscious bald man, Liu Yuanhui immediately understood what was going on. His eyes turned cold and he immediately took out his cell phone and made a call. In just a few minutes, the police arrived, handcuffed Baldy and others and took them away. A corner a few hundred meters away. A young man saw everything that had just happened with a telescope. His face was pale, and he took out his cell phone tremblingly. Brother Xiong, Brother Guang and the others are all dead. There was deathly silence on the other end of the line. After a long while, a hoarse voice sounded. Someone is protecting that kid. The young man wanted to report truthfully, but a hint of hatred suddenly flashed in his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. It was the police. Brother Guang and his friends were unlucky. They were caught by chance. The man surnamed Lin was alone and was almost caught by Brother Guang. Zhang Xiong on the other end of the phone snorted coldly, called him waste, and then hung up. The young man grinned. Zhang Xiong, you'll be killed if you mess with a monster like this. With red eyes, he looked at the Rolls-Royce that was gradually moving away. The sky gradually darkened. The Rolls-Royce weaved through the traffic and soon arrived at the most famous restaurant in Yunshan City, Changxianglu. It's just that Liu Qingya had originally booked a private room, but now she was informed that the room had been given to someone else. Liu Yuanhui frowned instantly. Liu Qingya was also a little unhappy. Changxianglu is well known, and it is really unacceptable for it to make such a mistake. Lin Fan smiled and said, forget it, just find a random seat. Finally, the three of them sat down at a window seat in the lobby on the 5th floor. Lin Fan, why are you in prison? Liu Qingya's delicate face was full of confusion. She graduated a year earlier than Lin Fan, and then went to Meili Country to study at Stanford Business School. During this period, she had been following Lin Fan's movements online. She knew everything about Zhou's every investment and every interview Lin Fan gave, but she didn't know why Lin Fan was imprisoned. Liu Qingya did not return to China until she fell ill. During this period, Liu Yuanhui sought out many famous doctors, but none of them could cure Liu Qingya. Finally, when Liu Qingya was in danger, Liu Yuanhui learned about Lin Fan's existence through various channels, and took the unconscious Liu Qingya to Nanjie prison to ask Lin Fan for help. Hearing Liu Qingya mention this, Lin Fan shook his head calmly. No reason, I'm just stupid. Liu Qingya wanted to ask more, but was stopped by Liu Yuanhui's look. At this moment, a familiar sharp voice reached the ears of the three people. Who do you think you are? You're just a waiter. Why are you so arrogant? Liu Yuanhui turned his head and saw Wang Fang pushing the waiter down with an arrogant look on her face, pointing at the hall arrogantly. There are so many people in the hall, it's giving me a headache. Hurry up and arrange a private room for me. I have plenty of money. Chapter 9. Zhu Dayong, who was standing next to him, also had a gloomy face. Ever since Lin Fan made the Zhou family a wealthy family, the two of them often came here to eat and even spent 2 million to get a membership card here. Of course, all the money spent was Lin Fan's earned. After being humiliated several times today, they decided to come to Changxianglu for a good meal. Only by being served like gods can they find the sense of superiority as a wealthy family. But now they are not even given a private room, and are forced to eat in their hall with a group of ordinary people. This doesn't give any face at all. The waiter got up from the ground, picked up the intercom and said a few words with a cold face. Then the manager of Changxianglu came to their hall with a dozen men in black, apparently wanting to drive Wang Fang and Zhu Dayong out. Liu Yuanhui retracted his gaze and saw that Lin Fan didn't even look over there, so he couldn't help but chuckle. I heard that this Changxianglu was opened by a young man in the capital. I'm afraid the Zhou family will suffer a big setback next. Lin Fan picked up his phone and sent a message to Tang Feng while saying hum. At this moment, the people in the hall heard Wang Fang's arrogant words and cast disgusted looks at her. Yes, they are ordinary people, but they don't have any extra eyes or hands like you do. He seems like a brainless person who dares to cause trouble in Qinxiang Tower. Just at this moment, the elevator door opened. Zhu Haoran pulled Wu Meiling out, and when he saw the situation at the scene, his face suddenly became gloomy. Wang Fan was surrounded by a group of men in black, but she didn't realize the seriousness of the situation. She put her hands on her hips and pointed at a private room next to her. That's it. You bunch of bastards, I'm a member of Changxianglu, I'm your god. I am from the Zhou family. The Zhou group belongs to me. If you don't give me this private room today, I will make sure that your Changxianglu can't continue to operate. Hearing this, Zhu Haoran's face became even uglier. Although he didn't know who exactly opened Changxianglu, he had heard some rumors and knew he couldn't afford to offend. Mom! What are you talking about? Zhu Haoran hurried forward and said to the manager with a smile, I'm really sorry, my mother is not in a good mood. The manager obviously knew Zhu Haoran. His brows were furrowed, and his voice was still a little cold. Mr. Zhu, we welcome you to Qinxiang Tower, but this is not a place where you can cause trouble. If there is a next time. Zhu Haoran smiled and nodded, but cursed in his heart, a dog relying on the power of others. The boss of Changxianglu is a big shot, how dare you, a lowly manager like you, talk to him like this? You really think you are a dish? Seeing Zhu Haoran apologizing to the other party, Zhu Dayong looked unhappy. Haoran, how can you be so spineless? They should be the ones to apologize. I don't blame you for being bullied before, but now you have the Zhou family backing you up, and we back you up, so you have to remember that you are the best. These words immediately drew contentious looks from everyone in their hall. People may have different powers, but their personalities should not be divided into high and low. At this moment, the door of the private room next door was pushed open. A burly, dark-skinned man frowned and looked at Wang Fang and the others. Please keep your voice down and don't disturb my boss's meal. Wang Fang was in menopause and was already furious. When she heard this, she pointed at the man and cursed. I shouted loudly, so what? Are you going to bite me? You call me boss? How big of a boss? Is he as big as my Zhou family? Zhu Dayong acted like the head of the family, with his hands behind his back, and spoke in a commanding tone. I'll pay 100,000 yuan to get the people inside out and give the room to us. The man stared at Zhu Dayong expressionlessly. Just as he was about to take action, he saw the manager running over with his men again. The manager's expression was extremely ugly. He stared at Zhu Haoran and growled with gritted teeth. Mr. Zhu, you'd better keep your parents under control. The person eating here is our boss. Boss? The boss of Changxianglu? The rumored young master from Beijing? Zhu Haoran's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly grabbed Zhu Dayong and Wang Fang and left. Wang Fang originally wanted to make a scene, but when she heard Zhu Haoran say that they couldn't afford to offend the people inside, her expression immediately changed. Wu Meiling crossed her arms across her chest, a hint of barely perceptible contempt flashing across her eyes. In her opinion, Zhu Dayong and Wang Fang are just second-rate people. If it weren't for Lin Fan, the two of them would still be hiding in a small mountain village, and they might not even be able to get enough food and clothing. Thinking of Lin Fan, Wu Meiling sneered in her heart. It's just a stepping stone on the road to success. Finally, Zhu Haoran pulled Zhu Dayong and Wang Fang to sit down at an empty table. Then he looked at Wu Meiling, who was walking over, with an apologetic look on his face. Sorry, dear, Changxianglu is so popular. Next time I will definitely book a private room in advance. Wu Meiling said, it's okay, considerately, then sat down next to Zhou Haoran with a smile. The next moment, she caught a glimpse of Lin Fan, who was sitting by the window a few meters away, in the moonlight. Looking at the young woman sitting opposite Lin Fan, even though only half of her face was shown, she could still tell that she was more beautiful than Wu Meiling. Wu Meiling's expression suddenly changed. Even if I abandon Lin Fan, he should still cling to me. Instead of looking for a new lover. And that woman, she treated the man she didn't want as a treasure, how cheap. Her smile was so disgusting. Noticing Wu Meiling's eyes, Zhou Haoran also looked over. The moment he saw Lin Fan, Zhou Haoran's face darkened. However, because of the angle, he couldn't see Liu Qinya's face. Mom and Dad, it's the second brother. Zhou Haoran pretended to be surprised and was about to stand up. I'll go find my second brother and clear up the misunderstanding. We are still a family. Zhu Dayong and Wang Fang looked back and saw that it was indeed Lin Fan, and they were about to explode. But when he thought about the mysterious boss of Changxianglu having dinner, he was afraid that he would get into trouble if he made trouble again. For a moment, the two had to suppress their anger. However, Zhu Dayong still stared at Zhou Haoran and scolded him in a low voice. Sit down, you spineless bastard. I told you, he doesn't deserve to be a member of the Zhou family, let alone your second brother. Wang Fang also hurriedly persuaded. My dear son, you are the only heir of our Zhou family. That jinx is just a prisoner. Mom asked someone to calculate and found that he is unlucky for our family. You must not make a mistake. Hearing this, Zhou Haoran pretended to be embarrassed, but still chose to sit down. But he was sneering in his heart. If I don't pretend to be kind and innocent, how can I let you two old guys let down your guard? When I get all of Zhou's shares, I will show you what cruelty and ruthlessness means. The old man called me a good son before today, which made me feel a little touched. I was angry today. Something went wrong with Zhou and he started scolding me. Har har, what a bullshit family relationship, it's worthless. Only interests are real. At this moment, the door of the private room opened again. A middle-aged man in a suit came out to answer the phone. When he caught a glimpse of Liu Yuanhui out of the corner of his eye, he was stunned for a moment. Then he saw Lin Fan, and he was even more surprised. He quickly hung up the phone and walked over quickly. Mr. Lin, Mr. Liu, what a coincidence. Chen Yuanhui was a little surprised when he saw the other party, but he still greeted him with a smile. He was about to introduce him to Lin Fan when Lin Fan calmly said, I've met him before. Ma Youji, chairman of Youji Group. Youji Group is the world's largest traditional Chinese medicine company. In terms of wealth, Ma Youji and Liu Yuanhui are comparable. Yuanhui Group started out in the shipping industry and is now engaged in the investment industry. The two groups have cooperated for many years. The reason why Lin Fan knew Ma Youji was because of his master Jiang Chongwu. When the master was young, he asked Ma Youji to help collect a lot of medicinal herbs and promised to do him a favor. Half a year ago, Ma Youji was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. He was tortured by illness and had no access to medical treatment, so he had to go to Nanjie prison and ask his master Jiang Chongwu for help. But by then Jiang Chongwu had already passed away. Lin Fan treated Ma Youji as a way of repaying his master's kindness. That's why Ma Youji was so excited when he saw Lin Fan. Mr. Lin, it's great to meet you. His attitude towards Lin Fan was more respectful than Chen Yuanhui's. Because he knew Lin Fan's master Jiang Chongwu and knew that he was a godlike figure. As Jiang Chongwu's apprentice, Lin Fan is naturally not an ordinary person. Ma Youji pointed to the private room and spoke nervously. Mr. Lin, it's noisy outside, why don't we go to the private room? Before he could finish his words, Lin Fan gave him a cold look. Ma Youji suddenly broke out in sweat, I have something to ask of you. Lin Fan put down his chopsticks and asked expressionlessly. You know my rules. Yes, I understand. Ma Youji was delighted, don't worry. Lin Fan then stood up and walked towards the private room. Ma Youji smiled and looked at Liu Yuanhui, then at Liu Qinya. This must be brother Liu's daughter, come on, let's go in together. Liu Yuanhui glanced at his daughter and saw that she was staring at Lin Fan's back, so he smiled and nodded. Wu Meiling, who had been staring at Lin Fan, was stunned. Lin Fan, he walked towards that private room. As soon as these words were spoken, Zhou Haoran, Zhou Daeon, and Wang Fan all looked towards the door of the private room. Zhou Daeon snorted coldly with a gloomy look in his eyes. He is asking for death. Even our Zhou family cannot afford to offend the people in there. He is courting death. Wang Fan even took out her cell phone, ready to record the scene of Lin Fan being beaten to a pulp. She would have to watch it over and over again when she got home to vent her anger. But the next moment, they saw Lin Fan walk into the private room. Walked in safely. Chapter 10. At this time, many people in the hall noticed this scene. When Wang Fan was causing trouble earlier, they all heard the words, Zhou Group. I have to admit that the Zhou Group has a very high status in Yunshan City. Even so, the Zhou family was frightened by the big shot in the private room and gave in. But now, someone was actually invited into the private room. Moreover, they were sitting in the hall to eat before, and they didn't think they were so great like the Zhou family. This is the difference between people. For a time, many people were curious about Lin Fan's identity. Wang Fan is narrow-minded. Hearing the constant discussions in the hall and the contentious looks, he was so angry that he gritted his teeth. She stared at the private room, threw her chopsticks on the table, and reached out to pull Zhou Daeon. Where do you think that Jinx gets the money to eat here? Zhou Daeon's face turned pale. Is there any need to ask? That bastard must have hidden money from us before. As he said this, he glared at Zhou Haoran. You have some potential. I must get the money back later. Zhou Haoran didn't say anything, but squinted his eyes and stared at Liu Qingya's back, feeling as if he had seen her somewhere. Wu Meiling also had a cold face and frowned, and she also felt that Liu Qingya was somewhat familiar. In the private room, apart from the flat-headed bodyguard standing against the wall, there was only a man fiddling with his cell phone. When he looked up and saw Lin Fan coming in, he subconsciously picked up his sunglasses and put them on. The flat-headed bodyguard took 2 steps forward and was about to scold him, but Ma Youji, who followed him in, quickly introduced. Mr. Liu, this is Mr. Lin Fan. He is the miracle doctor I told you about. Lu Han was stunned. He never expected that the miracle doctor Ma Youji mentioned would be so young. Coming back to his senses, Lu Han stood up and walked towards Lin Fan, smiling and extending his hand. Mr. Lin, nice to meet you. Don't hit a smiling person. Although Lin Fan didn't know Lu Han, he still raised his hand and shook hands with him. At this time, Liu Yuanhui also came in with Liu Qingya and closed the door. When they saw Lu Han, they both showed surprise on their faces. Liu Yuanhui was surprised because he roughly knew Lu Han's background. Someone from the Liu family in Beijing. Liu Qingya was surprised because Lu Han was a popular star in the past 2 years. Ma Youji introduced with a smile, Mr. Liu, this is the chairman of Yuanhui Group, Mr. Liu Yuanhui, and the one next to him is his daughter. Lu Han smiled and nodded. Nice to meet you, Uncle Liu, Miss Liu, please take a seat. As he spoke, he looked at his bodyguard and said, have someone serve the food and send a few bottles of good wine. After the bodyguards left the room, Ma Youji looked at Lin Fan and said straight to the point, Mr. Lin, this is what happened. Mr. Liu's brother went out for a trip some time ago, and after returning, he got a strange disease. Uncle Mar, let me tell you, Lu Han looked at Lin Fan solemnly. My eldest brother took people to Mount Shuilao to look for a medicinal herb called blood ganoderma. He has been in a coma since he came back. The hospital couldn't find the cause, and several famous doctors were invited but they still couldn't find the problem. Ma Youji took over the conversation with an apologetic look on his face. The Liu family was looking for a famous doctor online. When I saw the news, the first person I thought of was you, Mr. Lin, so I contacted the Liu family. Lin Fan took out a cigarette, then he remembered that he didn't have a lighter. He frowned slightly, looked up at Lu Han and asked. You just mentioned Shuilao Mountain and the blood ganoderma. Lu Han nodded. After a brief silence, Lin Fan put the cigarette into the cigarette box and said coldly, what does your Liu family want the blood ganoderma for? Hearing the chill in Lin Fan's tone, Lu Han answered truthfully, heal my father. Lin Fan looked at Lu Han expressionlessly. Although the word ganoderma is in the name, it is not a medicinal herb at all. It is a kind of fungus that grows on piles of dead bodies. It is extremely poisonous. Now you're telling me it's to cure your father. Hearing this, Lu Han's expression suddenly changed, and he stood up. Mr. Lin, are you kidding? As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Han's cell phone suddenly rang. The ringtone was his own song, but it sounded so harsh at the moment. Suppressing the uneasiness in his heart, Lu Han pressed the answer button. A woman's crying voice came out immediately. Xiao Han. Come back soon, something happened to your dad. Lu Han's face turned pale and he subconsciously looked at Lin Fan. Lin Fan took the lighter from Liu Yuanhui, lit the cigarette and said, "Send me a photo so I can see it." Lu Han nodded quickly. "Mom, quickly take a picture of my dad and send it to me." The woman on the other end of the phone was obviously panicked and was choking as she asked something. "Mom, don't ask any more questions, just do as I say." After saying that, Lu Han hung up the phone directly, but his whole body was shaking slightly. Soon, a video was sent over. Lu Han quickly handed the phone to Lin Fan. In the video, a middle-aged man with facial features somewhat similar to Lu Han was lying on the bed. The middle-aged man was in a coma, his face was purple, and his blood vessels were bulging all over his body, as if earthworms were crawling all over his body. His body was wrinkled, as if he was shedding skin. A skinny old man is taking the pulse of a middle-aged man. In the video, you can hear a lot of panicked cries. Lin Fan returned the phone to Lu Han and said coldly, "Send the person to Yunshan City within 10 hours, otherwise he will be killed." These words undoubtedly made Lu Han's heart sink to the bottom. "Mr. Lin, could you please go to the capital, Before he finished speaking, Marioji quickly spoke up, "Mr. Lu, not seeing patients is one of Mr. Lin's rules. It's better to send your father to Yunshan City as soon as possible." Lu Han did not dare to hesitate and immediately called his mother. "Mom, arrange a plane immediately to send my dad to Yunshan City. I'll be waiting at the airport. Be quick." After saying that, Lu Han bowed to Lin Fan and said, "Mr. Lin, if you need anything else, I will arrange for someone to prepare it immediately." Lin Fan shook his head expressionlessly. "When the people arrive, send them to Yunlong Villa." Seeing Lu Han's anxious face, Lin Fan waved his hand. "Go ahead." Lu Han quickly said, "Excuse me." After saying that, he walked out of the room quickly, forgetting even to take his sunglasses. Immediately afterwards, there were bursts of exclamations from the hall outside. Lu Han! It's Lu Han! Lu Han, can you sign an autograph for me? Can we take a picture together?" Lin Fan saw the chaotic scene in the hall through the door frame and immediately frowned and looked at Marioji. "Is this Lu Han famous?" Before Marioji could speak, Liu Qingye explained with a smile. "He is a star. He debuted 3 years ago and has many fans." Lin Fan nodded indifferently, and saw out of the corner of his eye that Lu Han had been surrounded by the crowd. Fortunately, the flat-headed bodyguard appeared in time with a group of men in black, stopped the crowd and gave Lu Han a chance to leave. Just at this moment, someone grabbed Lu Han's arm. "Mr. Lu." "Hello, Mr. Lu." Wang Fang smiled and said, "Mr. Lu, I am from the Zhou family. Zhou Pharmaceutical belongs to my family. Don't leave yet. I will introduce my son to you. You can cooperate in the future." The manager of Changxianglu rushed over, but was pushed away by Zhu Daong. "Get lost, we are discussing cooperation with Mr. Lu." As he spoke, a flattering smile appeared on Zhu Daong's face. "Mr. Lu, our Zhu family is very powerful. Really, my son Zhu Haoren is a graduate student at Beijing University. You might even know him." The two of them thought very simply. If we can get Lu Han's investment, it doesn't matter whether Yuanhui Group invests or not. Although I don't know Lu Han's background, since he is a rich man from Beijing, his family must be rich. What's more, this guy is a star. Stars have to save face, so he definitely can't be rejected in public. Even though they saw Lu Han's face full of anger, Zhu Daong and Wang Fang had no intention of letting Lu Han leave. Wu Meiling, who was in the crowd, suddenly narrowed her eyes. She picked up 2 plates, squeezed over quietly, and smashed them directly on Wang Fang and Zhu Daong. Wang Fang cried out, "Ouch," and immediately turned around and started to curse. Who the hell dares to hit me? Chapter 11. Zhu Daong even glared at a young man and grabbed him by the collar. The scene suddenly became chaotic. Wu Meiling walked quickly forward and pulled Lu Han into the elevator. "Call." Wu Meiling patted her chest, looked at Lu Han nervously, and said with a smile, "Master Lu, it's okay." Lu Han took out his cell phone to make a call while nodding and saying thank you. After getting out of the elevator, Lu Han quickly ran towards the parking lot. but a black Maybach was blocking his car. Luhan suppressed his anger and prepared to call the bodyguard to come down. Wu Meiling, who followed, recognized at a glance that the Maybach was the car Zhou Hairan drove. She panted and pointed to the blue Bentley next to her. "Mr. Lu, where are you going?" "Drive my car." Luhan couldn't get through to his mother on the phone, and he became more and more anxious. He no longer hesitated, nodded, and said thank you. At this time, Lin Fan, Liu Qingya, Liu Yuanhui and Ma Youji just walked out of Qinxiang Tower. When Liu Yuanhui saw Luhan get into Wu Meiling's car, he frowned instantly. Liu Qingya subconsciously looked at Lin Fan and poked Lin Fan's arm with a finger. "Junior brother, that seems to be your girlfriend Wu Meiling." Lin Fan shook his head indifferently. "That bitch has nothing to do with me now." After hearing this, Wu Meiling was confused but did not ask anything. Just looking at the blue Bentley going away, she felt inexplicably happy. She had a bad impression of Wu Meiling to begin with. When she met Lin Fan and Wu Meiling for the first time in college, she went up to them and greeted them enthusiastically. Although Wu Meiling acted calm and composed at the time, her eyes were filled with disgust and coldness. At that time she could see that Wu Meiling was a very scheming person. Later, every time she saw Lin Fan and Wu Meiling together, she subconsciously avoided them. He only came forward to say hello when he saw Lin Fan alone. Liu Yuanhui frowned and looked at Ma Youji. "Old Mar, does Luhan know Wu Meiling?" Ma Youji was full of confusion. "Wu Meiling? I have never heard of this name." This is also the first time for young Master Lu to come to Yunshan City. Lin Fan glanced at his phone and said to Liu Yuanhui and Liu Qingya, "I'll go back to Yunlong Villa first. Tang Feng is waiting for me." Hearing this, Liu Yuanhui nodded quickly, stuffed the car keys into Liu Qingya's hand, and said with a smile, "Mr. Lin, let Xieyar take you home. I'll take Lao Mar's car back to the provincial capital." Lin Fan glanced at the time and nodded without refusing. Liu Qingya quickly started the Rolls-Royce and drove over to park next to Lin Fan. Just at this moment, there was a commotion at the entrance of Qinxiang Tower. The next moment, Wang Fang and Zhu Dayong were thrown out by a group of men in black and rolled right to Lin Fan's feet. Both of them had bruised faces and noses, obviously having been beaten up. Wang Fang was an expert at playing the scoundrel, crying and rolling on the ground. "God damn it, please send thunder to kill these bastards." The bodyguard with the flat head looked around and couldn't see Luhan. He suddenly became furious and rushed over, grabbed Wang Fang's collar and slapped her twice. Now Wang Fang didn't even dare to cry. Zhu Dayong used to be a bully in the village, so how could he dare to speak at this time? The two of them were angry but had nowhere to vent their anger, so their eyes turned to Lin Fan. Especially Lin Fan's condescending and cold gaze made the two of them full of anger. "What are you looking at, you jinx? I knew you were unlucky for our Zhou family. Every day you're in Yunshan City, our Zhou family will be unlucky. Why don't you die in prison?" Ma Youji was not clear about the relationship between the two and Lin Fan. Seeing that they were disrespectful to Lin Fan, he immediately wanted to teach them a lesson. However, the flat-headed bodyguard reacted faster. He waved his hand, and several men in black immediately dragged Zhu Dayong and Wang Fang away. The next moment, screams were heard. The flat-headed bodyguard bowed to Lin Fan and apologized. "I'm sorry to trouble you, Mr. Lin." Chapter 12. Lin Fan waved his hand and got into the Rolls-Royce. After watching the Rolls-Royce drive away, Ma Youji drove Liu Yuanhui towards the provincial capital. No one noticed. Zhou Hairan has been in that black Maybach. He was originally in the car answering Scar Xiong's call. Wu Meiling was being attentive and drove Luhan away, and he saw it. He also saw Zhu Dayong and Wang Fang being thrown out. He also recognized Liu Qingya and saw Lin Fan get into her Rolls-Royce. At this point, he understood everything. That bitch Wu Meiling is probably going to throw herself at Luhan. Lin Fan is a gigolo who hooks up with the daughter of Yuanhui Group. No wonder Yuanhui Group cancelled its investment in itself. No wonder Lin Fan could come to Qinxiang Tower and enter that private room. In the car, Zhou Hairan's already feminine face became particularly distorted. He called Scarface again. "Brother Xiong, I'm sure that Lin Fan doesn't have much ability, but he is hooking up with the daughter of Yuanhui Group. Send someone to help me set up a trap." At this time, Liu Qingya had already driven a Rolls-Royce across the Yunjiang Bridge. The wind from the river blew into the car, feeling particularly refreshing. Liu Qingye couldn't help but glance at Lin Fan out of the corner of her eye. I still remember that during college, Lin Fan was really good to Wu Meiling. During the time she was studying abroad, she often saw the two of them being interviewed together on the internet. The two have always been known as the talented man and beautiful woman in Yunshan City's business community, a match made in heaven. But now they have broken up. She didn't ask the reason, but thought it was a good thing for Lin Fan. To put it bluntly, Wu Meiling is not worthy of Lin Fan. The car slowly drove into Yunlong Villa. Tang Feng has been waiting for a long time. Liu Qingye parked the car in front of the villa and waved to Lin Fan with a smile. Have a good rest. If you need anything, call me and I'll bring it to you when I'm free. By the way, I haven't changed my number. Lin Fan nodded, drive slower. After saying that, Lin Fan walked towards the gate of the villa. Liu Qingye coughed and said, I'm staying in a hotel tonight. Lin Fan looked back with some doubt. You're not going back to the provincial capital. The Liu family is in the provincial capital, and Yuanhui Group is also in the provincial capital. The journey is not far, and it can be reached in 2 hours. Liu Qingye rolled her eyes at Lin Fan and started the car while muttering. Such a big house, do you need a room for me? It's not like we haven't lived together before. After saying that, she stepped on the accelerator and the Rolls-Royce rushed out immediately. Lin Fan didn't hear what she mumbled, but Tang Feng, who was standing next to the car, heard it. He put out his cigarette and grinned. Brother, this girl has slept with you. Lin Fan was a little dazed. When did I sleep with Liu Qingye? Suddenly, he remembered the time when he was bullied in his freshman year. After Liu Qingye sent herself to the school hospital, she stayed by her bed and stayed by her side all night. Saying that they slept together, although awkward, is reasonable. Patting Tang Feng on the shoulder, Lin Fan took him into the villa. Did you bring the stuff? Tang Feng nodded and took out a bag of golden needles from his handbag. After the examination, Lin Fan motioned Tang Feng to sit on the sofa and lift up his trouser legs. When Lin Fan saw the centipede-shaped scars on Tang Feng's right leg, his eyes suddenly turned cold. His knees were deformed, his leg bones were twisted, and his meridians were blocked. It was obvious that he had been injured several times in a row. Chapter 13. Did Scarface have someone do it? Tang Feng nodded and said nothing. Lin Fan's eyes instantly turned red. Tang Feng saved his life. The year he graduated, he was awarded the title of Outstanding Young Entrepreneur of Yunshan City and became the talk of the town. Because of this, another old pharmaceutical company in Yunshan City was on the verge of bankruptcy. As a result, the boss of that company failed to threaten Lin Fan and hired someone to kill Lin Fan. Late that night, Lin Fan was put into a sack and thrown into Yunjiang River. It was Tang Feng who saved him. Tang Feng couldn't swim and nearly lost his life. After that, Tang Feng became Lin Fan's right-hand man. It was precisely because of this incident that when Scar Xiong took the initiative to surrender, he gave Scar Xiong a chance and invested 20 million to help that bastard grow stronger. Otherwise, even if that bitch Wu Meiling had persuaded him, he would never have had anything to do with Scar Xiong. It turns out that he was really blind before. Brother, I'm fine. My legs may be broken but my brain is not, Tang Feng grinned, I can still serve you. Lin Fan closed his eyes and suppressed the anger in his heart. Wait, I'll tear Scarface's head off and let you kick it like a ball. Are you afraid of the pain? No. It hurts, brother, be gentle, be gentle. Lin Fan took a pillow and asked Tang Feng to bite it, and in no time he broke his leg bone that had already healed. Cold sweat instantly soaked Tang Feng's whole body. The pain made his veins pop out and he almost fainted. While Lin Fan was inserting the golden needle into Tang Feng's leg, he said in a deep voice. Hold it back. You're not afraid of death, so why are you afraid of this little pain? Tang Feng clenched his fists, his whole body twitched in pain, and he roared like a wild beast. A full half hour. Lin Fan glanced at Tang Feng, then suddenly raised his hand and patted him on the knee. After a few clicks, the bones returned to their original positions, and hundreds of golden needles began to resonate at an extremely high frequency. A large amount of black blood clots began to emerge along the golden needle. Only when the blood turned red did Lin Fan start to pull out all the golden needles. Cold sweat slid down Tang Feng's face. He looked down at his right leg and saw the hideous scars were still there. But the originally twisted legs have now returned to their normal shape. His eyes instantly turned red. Brother, you didn't operate the sewing machine in prison. Were you assigned to help out in the infirmary? Lin Fan stuffed a cigarette into his mouth and lit one for himself, ignoring his joke. Tell me about the new company. In fact, Lin Fan doesn't need to start a company now. There is no need to accumulate wealth in this way. But those people brought out by Zhou need a job to support their families. They need a platform to realize their values and ambitions. When it comes to business, Tang Feng also becomes serious, takes a deep puff of cigarette, and says in a deep voice, "We have submitted the registration information, and the new office building has been selected. We have an appointment to discuss the price tomorrow. We have also contacted those old customers, and they all expressed their willingness to cooperate with us." At this point, Tang Feng's eyes were already full of anger, and he gritted his teeth and sneered. "The new company will be open for business in a week at most. I want to see how the Zhou family will look when the time comes." Lin Fan put out his cigarette and asked, "How are the people brought out from Zhou arranged?" "Except for the senior executives, everyone else has a week off." Lin Fan nodded. At that time, everyone's salary will increase by 20%. After saying that, Lin Fan checked the time, pulled a blanket over and threw it on Tang Feng's legs. "Lie down first. I'll have someone send a wheelchair over. In a week, you'll be able to use crutches to get out of bed, and in half a month, you'll be able to walk." Lin Fan paused as he spoke. "Are your parents safe?" "It's safe. We should have reached the county seat by now. I haven't told anyone where my hometown is." Chapter 14. Early morning hours. A convoy set out from Yunshan Airport, escorting an ambulance and driving quickly towards Yunlong Villa. Those who are attentive can find that the route from the airport to Yunlong Villa has been put under temporary control. The end of the convoy. Wu Meiling was driving a blue Bentley with an unconcealable smile on her face. Although Yunshan City's economy is developing rapidly, it is still far behind that of the capital. The Wu family is considered a wealthy family in Yunshan City, but they are not even qualified to carry shoes for those big families in Beijing. Wu Meiling looked at the convoy ahead and the traffic control being carried out along the way. It is not difficult to imagine how powerful Lu Han's family is. A hint of confidence appeared on her face. Make sure you have left a good impression on Lu Han. Coupled with her appearance, figure and temperament, she didn't believe that she couldn't defeat Lu Han. Wu Meiling narrowed her eyes slightly. What Lin Fan, what Zhu Haoran, compared with Lu Han, they are nothing. She couldn't help but think of a few hours ago, when Lin Fan entered the private room where Lu Han was at Qinxiang Tower. Although I didn't see what happened inside, I know from thinking about it. Lin Fan must have been servile and fawning in front of Lu Han. How she hoped that Lin Fan would be there when she got off the bus. That bastard would probably be scared to death when he saw me and Lu Han together. Wu Meiling couldn't help laughing out loud, but her eyes turned cold the next moment. Only a young man from Beijing like Lu Han is worthy of me. Thinking that she had once been Lin Fan's girlfriend, even though she was using Lin Fan, she still felt disgusted. It would be great if that bastard died in prison. She set up a trap to make Lin Fan go to jail for her crime, and even bribed several serious criminals in the prison to kill Lin Fan. That bastard is lucky. From a distance, Wu Meiling had already seen the lights from Yunlong Villa, and suddenly she burst out laughing at her own amusement. Even she was not qualified to enter Yunlong Villa. How could Lin Fan appear there? Moreover, the Lu family sent the patient all the way from the capital to Yunlong Villa, which means that some important person living here is proficient in medicine. She thought of her eyes again. The hospital said I would gradually become blind. Before she went to Changxianglu for dinner, she had seen several famous Chinese medicine doctors, but none of them could see anything. This is also the worst thing for her now. It's all Lin Fan's fault. If it weren't for that jade pendant, I might not have been injured. I must find a way to get to know the miracle doctor who lives here later. At this time, the convoy had entered the tree-lined avenue and stopped at the entrance of Yunlong Villa. In the ambulance, Lu Han looked at his unconscious father and his sobbing mother. He didn't dare to waste time and simply opened the car door and jumped out. Two large men in black stood at the entrance. One of them called Lin Fan, and only after confirmation did he remove the roadblocks and let the convoy enter the villa. Wu Meiling drove at the back. The moment the car passed the roadblock, she became extremely excited. I actually entered the extremely mysterious Yunlong Villa. This indicates that our identity and status have been raised to a higher level. Soon, the convoy stopped outside Lin Fan's villa. A group of bodyguards quickly carried Lu Han's father out of the ambulance. Chapter 15. Lu Han quickly ran to the door of the villa and shouted, "Mr. Lin! Mr. Lin, I'm Lu Han." At this time, Wu Meiling slowly stopped the car. She deliberately slowed down her pace. Even though it was still dark, she could still see how good the environment of Yunlong Villa was. Envy, jealousy, all kinds of emotions surged in her heart. Especially this villa located on the lakeside, no matter in terms of size or location, it is definitely the best in Yunlong Villa. Wu Meiling's eyes were full of anticipation. She walked closer, staring at the gate of the villa, curious about what kind of important person could live here. The next moment, the door of the villa slowly opened. Lu Han quickly asked a group of bodyguards to carry his father into the villa. Wu Meiling only vaguely saw a blurry figure, who did not look like the old man she had imagined, but rather like a young man. For a moment, the corners of Wu Meiling's mouth slightly raised. A young man who is treated respectfully by Lu Han, doesn't he have a higher status and background than Lu Han? Thinking of this, she couldn't help but quicken her pace and trot to the door of the villa. But just as she was about to enter the villa, the door slammed shut. Wu Meiling and a group of bodyguards all stayed outside. The wind at this time is a little cold. Wu Meiling glanced at the bodyguards around her with disdain, then turned around and walked back to her car. She stared at the lighted room on the second floor and her face fell. In the room on the second floor, Lin Fan lit a cigarette and slowly walked to the bed. Looking at the unconscious middle-aged man on the bed, he stretched out 2 fingers and put them on his neck to feel his pulse. Then he casually pulled the middle-aged man's eyelids. It is certain that he was poisoned by the blood Ganoderma. Lin Fan stopped and put out his cigarette, glanced at Lu Han and asked, "Has the old man who examined your dad in the video arrived?" Lu Han shook his head, his expression instantly becoming nervous. "Mr. Lin, do you need to ask Master Miao to come over?" "Master?" Hearing Lu Han's address to the old man, Lin Fan sneered, with a hint of indifference in his eyes. "Has Maryoji told you about my rules for treating patients?" Lu Han nodded quickly, then took out a bank card and handed it to Lin Fan. Then he said, "There is a deposit of 100 million in the card. Our Lu family owes Mr. Lin a favor." Lin Fan casually took the bank card and threw it on the cabinet, then opened the window and said, "Go out and wait." Lu Han was stunned for a moment, then he reacted and quickly looked at his mother Zhao Yunji. "Mom, let's go out first and don't disturb Mr. Lin." But Zhao Yunji just stood there without moving. Although she is almost 50 years old, she looks so well maintained that people would believe she is only in her 30s. In addition, she is not only the daughter-in-law of the Lu family, but also comes from the Zhao family in the capital. Although her eyes are red, she still has the temperament of a superior. She stared at Lin Fan, choking with sobs and questioning, "Don't blame me for speaking harshly. If you can cure my husband, I will pay you any amount of money. But if you are a liar, I will make you pay the price." Zhao Yunji couldn't help but doubt. She didn't expect that after rushing here from the capital overnight, the miracle doctor she met was just a young man in his 20s. Looking at Lin Fan's casual movements just now, he suddenly felt uneasy. Even Master Miao was helpless about her husband's condition, but the young man in front of her didn't take it seriously at all. How could she believe this? Chapter 16. If there was no other way, she would never take the risk of letting Lin Fan treat her husband. Lin Fan seemed not to have heard what Zhao Yunji said, and a handful of golden needles appeared in his hand without him noticing. He casually tore off the middle-aged man's clothes, shook his wrist, and golden needles flew out, accurately piercing some special acupuncture points that ordinary people didn't even know about. In just a moment, a large amount of black blood with a fishy smell came out. In just a few seconds, the middle-aged man's body was covered with a thick layer of poisonous blood. This scene makes one's scalp tingle. Lu Han's eyes were full of worry, but he forced himself not to disturb Lin Fan. Zhao Yunji's face turned pale, tears welled up in her eyes, and she covered her mouth to prevent herself from making any sound. At this time, Lin Fan turned around and left the room, leaving only the words, "Stay away." At this moment, the middle-aged man on the bed began to tremble violently. As it shook, more black blood came out. The room was suddenly filled with a fishy smell, making Zhao Yunji and Lu Han feel dizzy. After a moment, Lin Fan walked back into the room. He walked to the bedside and glanced at the golden needles pierced into the middle-aged man's body. The next moment, Lin Fan held his breath and concentrated, then suddenly, at an extremely fast speed, he slapped the middle-aged man's head, neck, heart and lower abdomen more than a dozen times. Each hit was full of force, making a crisp par sound. When Lin Fan raised his hand, all the golden needles began to vibrate at a high frequency. The earthworm-like blood vessels on the middle-aged man's body began to spasm and twist as if they came alive. Black blood began to ooze from the mouth, nose, and even the ears and eyes. Zhou Yunji didn't dare to watch any longer, so she turned around, covered her mouth and sobbed quietly. Lu Han's face was also pale, and his body swayed and he almost fell to the ground. Lin Fan glanced at the mother and son, then retracted his gaze and picked up a dark green pill that he had placed on the bedside table. Both the color and size look very much like mung beans. But when Lin Fan stuffed the pill into the middle-aged man's mouth, a strong medicinal fragrance instantly emanated. Even the fishy smell in the whole room was suppressed. Lin Fan reached out again and pried open the middle-aged man's eyelids, frowned and said, "Trouble. Blood ganoderma is a kind of fungus that grows in piles of dead bodies." He had said this to Lu Han before in Qinxiang Tower. "This thing is extremely poisonous. Not to mention taking it by mouth, living people will be infected with fungi if it comes into contact with their skin. Then the flesh and blood of the human body will become nutrients for these fungi. An ordinary person can only persist for 12 hours at most before their vitality is exhausted, and then new blood ganoderma will grow on their body. For example, at this moment, the bodies of middle-aged people are already filled with hyphae of this fungus." Because he was already weak, the situation was even more serious than Lin Fan had expected. That's why Lin Fan said it was troublesome. Lin Fan exhaled a breath of foul air, held his breath and concentrated again, and his breath began to fluctuate slightly. Immediately afterwards, his eyes became stern, and he forcibly drew a trace of internal energy from his damaged dantian and gathered it in the palm of his right hand. The moment Lin Fan placed his right hand on the middle-aged man's forehead, the more than 100 golden needles piercing the middle-aged man's body began to vibrate more violently, and even made a faint buzzing sound. The pill that had just been fed into the middle-aged man's mouth was transforming into pure medicinal power, rapidly dissipating into the middle-aged man's limbs and bones. The middle-aged man's body was shaking even more violently, and black blood kept flowing out of his mouth and nose. A few minutes later, Lin Fan stopped, turned around and left the room again. When he came back, he handed 2 green bin-sized pills to Lu Han. 1 pill per person, 1 pill costs 100 million. Chapter 17. At this time, Lu Han was dizzy and had no time to think, so he put the pill directly into his mouth. His mother, Zhou Yunji, could not even stand steadily and had to hold onto the windowsill to avoid falling to the ground. After Lu Han stuffed another pill into Zhou Yunji's mouth, Lin Fan glanced at the two of them calmly. "The black blood that is flowing out is poisonous, so I asked you to wait outside." Lu Han felt a little better and asked nervously, "Mr. Lin, my dad." Lin Fan looked back at the middle-aged man on the bed. "You won't die. I'll prescribe a prescription. Go back and get the medicine. You'll wake up in 3 days and be out of bed in half a month. But it will take at least 3 months to fully recover." Hearing this, Lu Han immediately breathed a sigh of relief. But then he saw Lin Fan frowning. "The original poison in your father's body has also been cleared away." "The original poison?" A hint of doubt flashed across Lu Han's eyes. "My father was indeed weak, but we could not find the cause. Last year, we invited Master Miao to slowly treat him. Blood ganoderma can cure my father's illness. This is what Master Miao said." Lin Fan looked at Lu Han expressionlessly. "Let me remind you that what you see and hear may not be true." After saying that, Lin Fan walked to the bedside and began to remove the golden needles. After throwing all the gold needles into the trash can, Lin Fan picked up the bank card thrown on the cabinet. As he walked towards the door, he said, "Take the person away, take away the bedsheets and trash can and burn them. I'll write the prescription and put it on the coffee table on the first floor. Also, transfer another 1 billion to the card." By the time Lu Han reacted, Lin Fan had already gone downstairs. He looked at his mother and let out a long sigh. "Mom, don't worry, my dad is fine." Zhou Yunji walked quickly to the bedside and reached out her trembling hand to check her husband's breath. "Breathe steadily." Although his body was covered with a thick layer of black blood, the originally protruding blood vessels had returned to normal. Mr. Lin is truly amazing. I'm afraid Master Miao can't even catch up to 1/10 of Mr. Lin's ability. Lu Han couldn't help but say this. Zhao Yunji also regained her composure at this time, and a hint of coldness flashed in her eyes. From what Mr. Lin said, I think there might be something wrong with Master Miao. As she spoke, she took out her cell phone and began to send instructions to the capital. Then the message I got was, Master Miao is missing. This further confirmed Zhao Yunji's guess. The sky outside the window gradually brightened. Lu Han carried his father back to the ambulance, and then walked into the villa with his mother. I didn't pay attention when I came, but now I found that there was a young man lying on the sofa. Who else could it be but Tang Feng? He smiled and glanced at Lu Han and Zhao Yunji, then pointed to an open cigarette box on the coffee table. There was a pen but no paper, so my brother wrote the prescription on the cigarette box. Lu Han carefully picked up the cigarette box and handed it to his mother before he smiled and clasped his fists to Tang Feng. Are you Mr. Lin's younger brother? Yes, dear brother, my name is Tang Feng. Lu Han was stunned and didn't react for a moment. Lin Fan came out of the bathroom on the first floor at this time. While wiping his hands with a towel, he looked at Lu Han and said, Can you ask someone to buy me a wheelchair? Lu Han nodded in agreement, walked out of the villa quickly and asked someone to buy a wheelchair. Seeing him turn around and enter the villa, Wu Meiling quickly opened the car door and ran over. Mr. Lu, wait a moment. Lu Han frowned slightly, but still stopped. When Wu Meiling ran up to him, he spoke in a deep voice, Ms. Wu, thank you for helping me to go to the airport last night. Wu Meiling shook her head and looked at the ambulance with concern. Mr. Lu, is your father okay? Lu Han nodded with lingering fear. Mr. Lin is a skilled doctor, my father is out of danger. Mr. Lin? There was a flash of surprise in Wu Meiling's eyes, but she returned to normal the next moment. She couldn't help but look sideways into the villa. Is this miracle doctor's surname Lin? Mr. Lu, to be honest, my eyes are injured. I wonder if you can recommend this miracle Dr. Lin to me. Wu Meiling bit her lips lightly, her eyes full of anticipation, and a hint of nervousness appeared on her face just right. It looked like a drowning person suddenly grabbing a life-saving straw. Thinking about how Wu Meiling took the initiative to help last night and stayed up all night, she is obviously a kind and good girl. Lu Han nodded. I'll go in and talk to Mr. Lin. If Mr. Lin is willing to treat you, I'll pay for your consultation. Wu Meiling was delighted. How much can the consultation fee be used for? Her real purpose is to get to know this great Dr. Lin. Watching Lu Han walk into the villa, Wu Meiling became more and more excited. In the villa, Zhao Yunji was apologizing for her earlier doubts about Lin Fan. Chapter 18. Lin Fan didn't take it to heart. Mr. Lin, 1 billion has been transferred to that card. Compared to last night at Qinxiang Tower, Lu Han's tone was obviously more respectful. Also, I don't know when it's convenient for Mr. Lin. I would like to send my eldest brother to Yunshan City and ask you to treat him. Right. Zhao Yunji also wanted to talk about this matter. Lin Fan sat down on the sofa, threw a cigarette to Tang Feng, and lit one for himself. Any day, come and talk about it. Lu Han nodded and pointed outside. A friend helped me last night. She seems to have some eye problems, and she would like you to treat her. I wonder if it's convenient for you, Mr. Lin. Outside the door, Wu Meiling was waiting excitedly. She could vaguely hear some of the conversation inside, and even felt that the voice of Dr. Lin was somewhat familiar. The most important thing is, judging from their voice, this Dr. Lin is actually a young man. She looked down at her high-end clothes and smoothed her hair to make sure she looked her most beautiful. But the next moment, her smile froze on her face. Because a familiar voice came from the villa. If there's something wrong with her eyes, then that means she shouldn't have eyes. Let her go, even if she dies, let her die far away. The extremely cold voice instantly shattered Wu Meiling's expectations. Since she was born, no one has ever dared to insult her like this. She didn't understand why the divine Dr. Lin said such harsh words to her, even refusing to give her a chance. It must be that Lu Han didn't explain it clearly. As long as Dr. Lin looks at me, he will definitely not refuse. She is absolutely confident in her appearance and figure. Thinking of this, Wu Meiling's face reappeared with a smile, and she said loudly, Hello, Dr. Lin. I am Wu Meiling from the Wu family. You should have heard of me. She believed that as long as Dr. Lin knew her, he would definitely change his attitude. because no one can resist a beauty like her. But the next moment, an extremely cold "get out" came from the villa. Last night at Qinxiang Tower, Lin Fan saw with his own eyes Wu Meiling driving Lu Han away. So as soon as Lu Han opened his mouth, he knew he was talking about that bitch Wu Meiling. At this time, Lu Han was also frightened by the chill emanating from Lin Fan. There are many people in high positions in the Lu family, but no one can possess such momentum. Even Zhao Yunji was shocked. I never expected that Lin Fan would suddenly become a different person. Tang Feng glanced at Lu Han coldly at this time. Mr. Lu, right? I advise you to stay away from that bitch outside. Lu Han was not stupid, and he immediately realized that there was some unpleasant past between Lin Fan and Wu Meiling. He nodded heavily, said sorry, and walked out of the villa with Zhao Yunji. Seeing Wu Meiling's red eyes and an expression of grievance that seemed like she was about to cry, Lu Han frowned instantly. Zhao Yunji glanced at Wu Meiling coldly, then pulled Lu Han away. How could she not see Wu Meiling's poor acting skills? Mr. Lu. Wu Meiling didn't dare to break into the villa, so she could only run to Lu Han with sobs. I'm sorry, because I made you angry with Dr. Lin Shan. Lu Han said, it's okay, expressionlessly and got into the car. After thinking it over again and again, he looked at Wu Meiling and said, thank you for your help last night. I'll have someone send a thank you gift. After saying that, the convoy left immediately, leaving only Wu Meiling standing there. Her face turned cold in an instant, her eyes were full of resentment, and her whole body was shaking with anger. With your status, staying up all night, being cold and hungry, is that enough to deserve a thank you gift? Just at this moment, Liu Qingye drove the Rolls-Royce slowly to a stop. She got off the car with breakfast and frowned instantly when she saw Wu Meiling. Didn't this woman break up with Lin Fan? Is he here to get back together with Lin Fan? Wu Meiling also stared at Liu Qingye coldly. She hates other women, especially those who are prettier than herself. What's more, Liu Qingye drives a better car than hers. Recognizing Liu Qingye as the woman who was with Lin Fan last night, Wu Meiling sneered, picking up a man I don't want, how shameless. Are you sick? Liu Qingye said this and walked to the door of the villa with breakfast. Wu Meiling crossed her arms over her chest and taunted. You've supported that pretty boy Lin Fan, and now you're trying to curry favor with divine Dr. Lin. Are you that hungry? Don't blame me for not warning you. Be careful not to get thrown out. However, the next moment, she saw the door of the villa was pushed open a little. Liu Qingye walked straight in. At the same time, a voice full of disgust came from the villa. Has that bitch outside gone? Chapter 19. Wu Meiling just felt as if she was slapped hard on the face. Why? She is the person in charge of the Wu Group. She is a beautiful CEO that is admired by thousands of people. Why don't I even have the qualifications to enter? She clenched her fists so tightly that her nails almost pierced through her palms, and her eyes became extremely vicious in that instant. She has never suffered such injustice. Hearing the bursts of laughter coming from the villa, Wu Meiling gritted her teeth and cursed, damn it, then turned and left. She has her own pride and will never stay here and humiliate herself. Suddenly, Wu Meiling stopped, her head felt dizzy, and her vision became blurry. She quickly held onto the Rolls-Royce next to her and it took her a while to stand up straight. But her eyes became more vicious. She glanced at the gate of the villa and saw that no one was paying attention, so she quietly took out the key and scratched the door of the Rolls-Royce a few times. Then she got into the blue Bentley with a look of relief, started the car and drove away. Seeing the beautiful environment of the villa along the way, she felt unbalanced again and secretly vowed that she would move in sooner or later. However, the next moment, the road was blocked by two big men in black. Get lost. Wu Meiling rolled down the car window and cursed coldly, a good dog doesn't block the road. The two big men in black frowned instantly and their eyes turned cold. You have trespassed into Yunlong Villa. We will let you go after we have checked the surveillance and confirmed that you have not stolen anything. Trespassing? Stealing? Wu Meiling's face looked extremely ugly, and her eyes were full of humiliation. You bastard! Do I look like a thief? One of my earrings is enough to buy both of your lives. However, the two big men in black remained indifferent and allowed Wu Meiling to sit in the car and curse. A moment later, a voice came from the intercom in the hand of one of the big men. We checked the surveillance cameras and her vehicle. Amid Wu Meiling's gnashing curses, the two big men ignored her scratching, and after carefully inspecting the blue Bentley, they finally moved the roadblock away. You two stinky security guards, just wait for me. If I don't kill you, I will write my name backwards. After she finished speaking, she stepped on the accelerator and the car rushed out immediately. When passing the bend ahead, it almost hit the ginkgo tree on the side of the road. Wu Meiling's face turned pale and she screamed and steered the car violently. The Bentley turned around twice before finally stopping in the middle of the boulevard. A black BMW was driving towards them quickly, and the driver slammed on the brakes, leaving 2 smoking brake marks on the road. After braking, the distance between the 2 cars was less than 10 centimeters. How do you drive? Wu Meiling cursed in a trembling voice. He recognized the flat-headed man driving the car as Lu Han's bodyguard, but he quickly laughed. Did Master Lu ask you to come back to find me? The flat-headed bodyguard glanced at Wu Meiling coldly. If you are blind, don't drive. You are harming others and yourself. The smile on Wu Meiling's face froze instantly. Watching the other party drive back into the villa, her anger reached its peak at this moment. Outside the villa, the flat-headed bodyguard quickly assembled the newly purchased wheelchair and shouted respectfully. Mr. Lin, the wheelchair has been delivered. The door of the villa was pushed open. Lin Fan and Liu Qingye walked out side by side. After reaching out and pressing the wheelchair to make sure it was sturdy, Lin Fan smiled and nodded. Thank you for your hard work. The flat-headed man smiled and shook his head, then respectfully handed over a business card. Mr. Lin, this is our young master's private phone number. The young master said that if you need him in any way, you can contact him anytime. Lin Fan took the business card and put it into his pocket, then carried the wheelchair into the villa. Tang Feng swallowed the bun in 2 or 3 bites, jumped on one leg and sat on the wheelchair, and said hurriedly. Brother, I made an appointment with Wang Jingming to discuss the purchase of an office building. He is waiting for me outside the villa. Lin Fan nodded and looked at the flat-headed bodyguard. Please send my brother outside the villa. Chapter 20. After the 2 left, Lin Fan turned his head and looked at Liu Qingye who was standing next to the Rolls-Royce. Glancing at the scratches on the car, Lin Fan frowned slightly. Do you want to get it repaired? Liu Qingye's eyes were full of confusion, and she had no idea when she scratched the car. After checking the time, she shook her head and said with a smile. I have a friend coming from the country of Mary and asked me to meet him. What about you? What are your plans today? I know I'm going to find someone to catch up with, too. Hearing this, Liu Qingye had to swallow the words she had not finished saying. A moment later, Liu Qingye drove Lin Fan to a certain intersection. After Lin Fan took a taxi and left, she frowned and answered the phone. Hi, Qingye, thank God, you finally answered the phone. I said that for you, I could come to the poor and backward Longwa, and now I have fulfilled my promise. There was a somewhat awkward Longwa dialect coming from the phone. I can tell he's a foreigner. Liu Qingye frowned even deeper, and her tone was a little cold. Mike, why are you here? Where's Jenny? The man on the other end of the phone smiled. Qingye, forgive me, in order to see you, I can only ask Jenny for help. Liu Qingye suddenly had no expression on her face. Mike, I never agreed to your pursuit. Your so-called promise is just to impress yourself. Besides, Dragon Country is not backward. Now that you are here, just open your eyes and look around. After saying that, Liu Qingye hung up the phone. Just as she was about to call Lin Fan, a black van suddenly braked to a stop beside her. Before Liu Qingye could react, several masked men got out of the van and covered her mouth and nose with a white towel. In just a few seconds, Liu Qingye fell into a complete coma and was then carried into a van. In the car, Zhou stared at Liu Qingye's beautiful face, reached out and lifted a strand of her hair, and sneered. If I take you down, Yuanhui Group will be my biggest backer. Drive, follow the plan. The van quickly left the scene. An hour later, we stopped at an abandoned factory. Zhou had Liu Qingye carried into an office and placed on a dusty desk. He had a grim smile on his face and his eyes were full of excitement. Go out and guard. No one is allowed to come in without my order. The masked men looked at each other, then turned and walked out of the room, closing the door behind them. When they came to the edge of the weeds about 10 meters away, several people lifted their masks halfway and lit a cigarette and puffed out smoke. Damn it. I just don't like him. In the past at the Jinhai Club, this bastard always bowed and scraped to us every time he saw us. Now he dares to order us around. A man next to him took a puff of cigarette, looked back at the room, and sneered. He won't be awesome for long. Brother Xiong is just using him as a pawn. But this woman is really exciting. That's right, I've never seen anyone with such a great figure. If Brother Xiong hadn't said I couldn't move, I would have had a blast. Mouse, weren't you fucking drained last night? Several people burst into laughter. In an abandoned office, Zhou Haran took out his cell phone with a grim smile and recorded the scene of Liu Qingya being tied up. Then he squatted beside her and took a selfie. After doing all this, he took out a pair of handcuffs from his pocket and handcuffed himself to the iron window. A few minutes later, Liu Qingya suddenly woke up and found her hands and feet tied. Panic and fear flashed in her eyes. But she soon calmed down, looked around the room, and finally her eyes fell on Zhou Haran. It's you? As for the people around Lin Fan, she only knew Liu Qingya. She met the Zhou family for the first time in Qinxiang Tower last night. As far as she knew, Lin Fan was particularly good to his adoptive parents. But last night, when Lin Fan saw Zhu Deong and Wang Fang being taught a lesson, he remained indifferent the whole time. So after leaving Yunlong Villa, Liu Qingya called her father Liu Yuanhui, and only then did she learn what happened to Lin Fan after he was released from prison. Therefore, she didn't have any good feelings towards Zhou Haran. Chapter 21. Zhou Haran opened his eyes weakly at this time, and when he saw Liu Qingya, he pretended to be very surprised. I think I've seen you at Yuanhui Group. Liu Qingya did not answer, but quickly thought of a way to escape. Zhou Haran coughed violently several times and said with a gasp, "Don't act rashly, I already have a way to escape." Liu Qingya frowned and glanced at Zhou Haran, with no intention of paying any attention to him. Outside, a few people who had just finished smoking heard a cough, looked at each other, put on their masks, and pushed the door open again. "Hey, you awake?" One of them walked up to Liu Qingya with a grin and grabbed her chin. "TSK TSK TSK, what a beauty tilder. You drive a Rolls Royce, your family must be very rich. Call and ask your family to give you 200 million. Liu Qingya's eyes were filled with coldness. "My name is Liu Qingya, my father is Liu Yuanhui, as long as you don't hurt me, money is not a problem." The masked men were a little confused and subconsciously looked at Zhou Haran, who was handcuffed to the iron window. Brother Xiong just asked them to cooperate with this bastard to kidnap someone and then put on a show. But he didn't say that the person kidnapped was the daughter of Liu Yuanhui, the richest man in southern province. It is no exaggeration to say that once the authorities know about this matter, all police forces in Yunshan City will be dispatched. Seeing that the masked men were about to get angry, Zhou Haran gritted his teeth and cursed. "What on earth do you want to do?" The masked men looked at each other. Now the arrow is on the string and it has to be shot. One of them gritted his teeth and stepped forward, staring at Liu Qingya and said, "So what if Liu Yuanhui? You are in our hands, how can he bite me?" As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and slapped Liu Qingya in the face. Liu Qingya said nothing but looked at the man coldly. "Call Liu Yuanhui and ask him to pay the money, or else he will collect his daughter's body." After saying that, several people walked out of the room again. Seeing Liu Qingya lowering her head in deep thought, Zhou Haran quickly whispered, "Ms. Qingya, don't be afraid. I will take you away if I have the chance." At this moment, a quarrel suddenly broke out outside. "Damn it, Lauer sent a message saying the police are on their way here. Someone must have seen him on the road. Go, go, go. Go quickly. Lao Wu, go and silence the witnesses." After saying that, there was the sound of footsteps running away. Immediately afterwards, the door was kicked open. A masked man came in cursing and looked at Liu Qingya with a grin. "My beauty, you are out of luck. The police are coming soon. I have no choice but to kill you. But don't worry, I'll give you a good time before I kill you." As he said that, he rushed forward and held Liu Qingya down. No matter how Liu Qingya struggled, it was of no avail. With a swish sound, Liu Qingya's clothes were torn, revealing her snow-white shoulders. At this moment, Zhou Haran, who was handcuffed, suddenly broke free, picked up a chair and smashed it hard on the masked man. The masked man swayed and fell to the ground. Zhou Haran panted heavily and untied the rope for Liu Qingya with trembling hands. He grabbed her hand and ran out. "Ms. Qingya, come on, I'll take you away." However, the next moment, Liu Qingya broke free, ran to the masked man who was pretending to be unconscious, and kicked him hard on the head. The masked man was a little confused. Before he could react, he was kicked unconscious. Zhou was also stunned for a moment, then stepped forward and grabbed Liu Qingya again, looking anxious. Ms. Qingya, please follow me quickly. If those people come back, we won't be able to escape even if we have wings. Liu Qingya broke free again and looked at Zhou coldly. Zhou's heart skipped a beat. Exposed? Impossible. Chapter 22. Zhou was about to say something when he suddenly heard footsteps outside the door. Immediately afterwards, at least 20 people came over. The leader was a middle-aged man with a cigar in his mouth. The man was a big, burly guy wearing a blue striped suit and looked like a businessman. But the scar of more than 10 centimeters on the right side of his cheek still exposed his identity. Scarface. Zhou took a step forward, stood in front of Liu Qingya, and kept winking at Scar Xiong. The next moment, the two people behind Scar Xiong quickly stepped forward and dragged Zhou away. Zhou was stunned. This is different from the plan. Scar Xiong took a puff of his cigar and handed a cell phone to Liu Qingya with a smile on his face. Ms. Qingya, call your father and tell him that you can exchange 10 billion for your life. Ask him if he wants to do this deal. Liu Qingya frowned, took the phone, and dialed a number without hesitation. Beep beep beep. Jinhai Club. Lin Fan kicked the last thug away and said indifferently, call Scar Xiong and tell him to come over to see me. The club manager was a fat man. He was so scared that he was trembling all over and kneeling on the ground, not daring to move at all. Are you kidding? Jinhai Club is where Brother Xiong started his career, and the dozens of thugs there are the most powerful ones under Brother Xiong. But now, dozens of people couldn't even last 2 minutes in this guy's hands. Is this guy still a human being? The manager took out his cell phone tremblingly and called Scar Xiong. At the same time, Lin Fan's cell phone rang. As soon as the call was connected, Liu Qingya's voice came over. Dad. Lin Fan looked strange, and was about to ask Liu Qingya if she had dialed the wrong number, but suddenly realized something might have happened to Liu Qingya. Dad, I've been kidnapped, and the other party wants 10 billion. Lin Fan was silent for 2 seconds, raised his hand and pinched his throat with a strange gesture, and then spoke again. His voice was surprisingly similar to Liu Yuanhui's. Give the phone to the kidnapper. While speaking, Lin Fan closed his eyes and listened carefully to the subtle noises coming from the phone. More than 10 seconds passed before Liu Qingya's voice sounded again. Dad, they asked you to transfer the money to an overseas account. I'll send you the account number. After saying that, Liu Qingya hung up the phone. Lin Fan frowned. The slight noise coming from the phone just now was not enough to determine where Liu Qingya was. At this moment, the club manager finally got through to Scar Xiong after several attempts. Why are you calling at this time? Scarface's voice sounded a little impatient. However, Lin Fan was able to keenly hear other people's voices on the phone. It seems to be reporting some number. Liu Qingya's voice could also be heard faintly. Could it be that the person who arrested Liu Qingya was Scar Xiong? Thinking of this, Lin Fan narrowed his eyes, stepped on the fat manager's shoulder, and signaled him to ask about Scar Xiong's location. The manager's face was pale and his voice was trembling. He sounded like he was about to cry. Xiong, Brother Xiong, where are you? The club was smashed. There was noticeable silence on the other end of the line. After a while, Scarface's hoarse voice, suppressing his anger, sounded again. What's the point of keeping a bunch of you trash? Tell me, who the hell did it? The fat manager subconsciously looked at Lin Fan. I don't know him. He smashed the clubhouse to pieces as soon as he arrived, and the brothers were all seriously injured. Scarface's angry cursing came from the other end of the phone. The manager quickly covered his phone with his hand and didn't let go until several seconds later. Scarface seemed to have regained his composure, and asked through gritted teeth, did that man come into my office? The fat manager was stunned for a moment, and when he saw Lin Fan nod, he quickly said, go in. Scarface Xiong on the other end of the phone started cursing again. Wait, I'll be back now. After that, the phone was hung up. Lin Fan also received several strings of numbers on his mobile phone. Obviously, they have several overseas bank accounts. Lin Fan kicked the fat manager to the ground and ordered. Chapter 23. Take me to Scarface's office. The fat man didn't dare to hesitate and ran upstairs, rolling and crawling. A moment later, The fat man took Lin Fan into an office on the third floor. The office is luxuriously decorated with rosewood tables and chairs, and antique shelves displaying hundreds of antiques. There is a large calligraphy hanging on the wall behind the boss's desk. Benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trustworthiness. How fucking ironic. Lin Fan looked around and his eyes fell on the antique display shelf. He kicked it over, and the antiques on it shattered to the ground. An invisible door appeared on the wall behind the shelf and was also kicked open by Lin Fan. A secret room suddenly appeared in front of Lin Fan. The fat manager was also stunned. Even he was not aware of the existence of this secret room. There was a red light on in the secret room, which looked a bit weird. In the middle, there were piles of cash, stacked up like a bed. The walls were covered with ropes, whips and all kinds of strange things. There is a bathroom separated by glass in the corner. What's more important is that there are dozens of cameras placed in various locations in this small secret room. A projector is also installed on the top of the secret room. The fat manager was completely dumbfounded. Seeing that Lin Fan's attention was not on him, he turned and ran. But the next moment, the cigarette butt in Lin Fan's hand flew out and hit him accurately on the back of the head. Bang! Sparks flew. The fat man rolled his eyes, fell to the ground and fainted. Lin Fan's gaze now fell on the safe embedded in the wall. Reaching out and pressing it, Lin Fan confirmed that the safe was made of steel plates at least 5 centimeters thick. However, this did not pose any difficulty for Lin Fan at all. He closed his eyes, held his breath, and forced himself to mobilize his internal energy again. He turned his wrist and slapped the keyhole with his palm. There was a loud bang. The whole wall seemed to be shaking. Then there were 2 more bang sounds. The door of the safe sprang open instantly. Everything stored inside was exposed to Lin Fan. Feeling a sharp pain in his dantian area, Lin Fan frowned and reached out to take out a gold USB flash drive. There is a number 9 engraved on it. There are 8 more of the same golden USB flash drives in the safe, numbered from 1 to 8. Lin Fan took out all 9 USB flash drives and looked at the projector above his head. A moment later, a projection screen appears on the wall. Lin Fan pressed the remote control and video files were opened one by one. The video was obviously recorded by these cameras in the secret room. Each video shows a woman being brutally tortured. Lin Fan had a blank expression on his face, but his eyes were frighteningly cold. When the contents of USB flash drive number 1 were projected, even Lin Fan couldn't help but say, "How audacious." Because this USB flash drive records the ugly things done by hundreds of people in this room. Lin Fan recognized it. These are some of the prominent figures in Yunshan City's business community. Who could have thought that these well-dressed, righteous people, who talk so much about righteousness and morality, could do things worse than animals? Beep beep beep. The fat manager's cell phone rang at this moment. Lin Fan turned off the projector, put the 9 USB flash drives into his pocket, then bent down to pick up his phone and pressed the answer button. Scarface roared anxiously. "Damn it, I've arranged for someone to come and guard the Jin High Club for me. If anyone escapes, I'll kill your entire family. Did you hear me, lousy?" However, the next moment, Scarface's voice stopped abruptly. Because Lin Fan spoke. "Scar, do you still remember me?" Chapter 24. Suburbs. Scar Xiong, who was furious, narrowed his eyes the moment he heard Lin Fan's voice. He took a long puff of his cigar and suddenly sneered, "Who was I thinking was so bold as to act wildly in my territory? It turned out to be Boss Lin. TSK, I heard that you were kicked out by the Zhou family and became a stray dog tilder." Scarface's voice was full of sarcasm. "I was thinking of letting you work for me and giving you a meal, but now it seems that you are tired of living." However, the next moment, Lin Fan's cold voice came from the phone. 9 USB flash drives, do you want them?" Scarface's expression changed immediately. He kicked the driver's seat and growled, "Stop the car." After the car stopped, Scar Xiong walked aside with a gloomy face. He knew better than anyone that once the contents of those 9 USB flash drives were exposed, he would surely be killed. No matter how arrogant he is, he dare not expose his evil deeds in public. After all, according to the laws of Dragon Kingdom, what he did is enough to deserve death 100 times. Scarface's eyes were filled with murderous intent. Over the years, he has always been the one threatening others, and no one has dared to threaten him in return. Xiong took a deep puff of his cigar and choked and coughed repeatedly. After a while, he pressed the record button and said expressionlessly, "Give me back my things, and I'll give you 100 million, plus 3 lives from the Zhou family." However, Lin Fan acted as if he hadn't heard this and went straight to the point. Change to Liu Qingya. Hearing this, Xiong narrowed his eyes again, threw away his cigar and sneered, "TSK TSK TSK, it turns out that he is hooking up with the daughter of Yuanhui Group. No wonder he was able to cut off Yuanhui Group's investment in Zhou's company. Lin Fan, Lin Fan, what can I say about you?" Xiong shook his head slowly, his words full of sarcasm. It seems that the lesson Wu Meiling taught you was not deep enough. Women are just playthings. Xiong rushed towards the convoy and made a U-turn, with murderous intent in his eyes. Western suburbs, Jingcheng Machinery Factory, one hand delivers the goods, the other hand delivers the people. After saying that, Xiong hung up the phone and got back into the car. He dialed another number and yelled, "Second brother, there's no need to go to the Jinhai Club. Bring your men to my place and bring guns." A moment later, the convoy drove back into the abandoned factory. In the room, Liu Qingya was tied up and thrown into a corner, but there was no one guarding her. Xiong immediately left the room with a dark face, cursing. Where the hell did all the people go? Not far away, a few hooligans ran out from the bushes. The man in the black vest at the head of the group said in a trembling voice, "Boss. Boss, Zhou Hairan ran away." Scarface's eyes looked like he wanted to eat someone. "Where's the money? Has it arrived?" "Not yet, not yet." Xiong had a gloomy face and kicked the man to the ground. His original plan was to wait until Yuanhui Group's investment was in place and let Zhou Hairan get all of Zhou's shares before taking action. However, Yuanhui Group stopped investing, and Zhou Group is now just an empty shell, which made him change his mind. Since Zhou Hairan wants to kidnap Liu Qingya, he has to act out a hero saving the beauty. Then he would make it real. He would get the money and kill Zhou Hairan and Liu Qingya without leaving any evidence. Xiong walked up to Liu Qingya and sneered. "I can't believe that the daughter of the richest man in southern province actually likes a pretty boy like Lin Fan. I'm going to be a good guy today and send you all to hell together." Liu Qingya just looked at Xiong coldly without saying a word. Soon, dozens of vans approached the abandoned factory quickly, raising clouds of dust. A sturdy man over 2 meters tall hurried over with more than 200 men. Without Xiong's orders, the sturdy man immediately arranged for people to hide around, waiting for Lin Fan to arrive. Just a few minutes later. Chapter 25. A taxi drove up quickly and stopped less than 100 meters away from the abandoned factory. Xiong stood on the roof, squinting his eyes at the taxi, with a confident look on his face as if he was in control of the situation. He is quite proud of his current achievements. The only shame in his heart was kneeling down to Lin Fan a few years ago. He smiled and looked at the burly man standing next to him. "For money and power, I can kneel down and give up my dignity. This is called being able to bend and stretch. But if you give me the chance, I will kill anyone I kneel before. He must pay for my dignity with his life." Har ha har ha. The second brother crossed his arms and had no expression on his face. He had been practicing Sonder since he was young, and because of his hot temper, he accidentally killed someone 3 years ago. It was Xiong who took him in. In his opinion, there was no need to go to such great lengths to kill Lin Fan. At this time, several young men had already run to the taxi. Seeing that there was no one in the car, one of the young men immediately waved at Scarface on the rooftop. "Boss, there's no one in the car." Xiong sneered, "Stop being clever, bring Liu Qingya up here." Soon, Liu Qingya was pushed to the roof. Scarface stared at the dense weeds surrounding the factory and suddenly caught sight of a collapsed wall. "Go check it out with a few people." Immediately someone ran over with a machete. What they found instead was Zhou Hairan lying in the bushes, shivering. This guy had a bruised nose and a swollen face, a cut on his forehead, and blood all over his face. "Let me go. Brother Xiong, you can't kill me." Zhou Hairan kept struggling, looking at Xiong standing on the roof and yelling, "Brother Xiong, we are partners. I gave you 20 million 2 months ago." But no matter how he roared, Scarface showed no intention of paying any attention to him. Seeing the machete on his neck, Zhou Hairan cursed with bloodshot eyes. "Xiong, just try to touch me. I am from the Zhou family, I am the boss of the Zhou group. If you kill me, you will be buried with me." Scar Xiong, who was standing on the roof, had a blank expression on his face and just made a gesture of wiping his neck. After seeing this, the two men pinned Zhou Haoran to the ground and raised their knives to chop him. But the next moment, a shrill alarm sounded. Police! The two men's faces changed drastically. They slashed Zhou Haoran twice and turned and ran away. On the rooftop, Scar Xiong saw the police car speeding towards him in the distance and his face looked extremely ugly. The scar on his face was twitching constantly due to anger. Lin Fan! Get out here! Scarface roared like a madman. Get out of here! Calling the police is nothing. He pulled Liu Qingye over and pushed her to the edge of the roof. I'll count to 3. If you don't get out, I'll push you out right now. 1. 2. At this moment, dozens of police cars were approaching the abandoned factory. His men who were hiding in various corners were also panicked at this time and began to flee. When you're out there, the most important thing is loyalty. But if you want to be loyal, you have to survive first. Scarface was still cursing at this time. Lin Fan, get out here right now, do you really think I don't dare to kill her? He had a crazy look on his face and pushed Liu Qingye forward. Most of Liu Qingye's body was suspended in the air in an instant. But even so, Liu Qingye still gritted her teeth, suppressed her fear and didn't make any sound. Lauer still held his hands in front of his chest, watching the policeman rushing towards the abandoned factory, frowned and said to Scarface Xiong. Chapter 26. Brother, it will be too late if you don't leave now. Scarface's eyes were full of ferocity. He knew very well that the moment the police showed up, it meant that those USB drives could not be retrieved. The only way left for him is to escape. He would be shot if caught anyway, so he didn't care about taking many lives. Letting go of his hand, he turned and ran. Liu Qingye felt her body falling rapidly and finally couldn't help but scream. The roof is more than 20 meters above the ground, and falling down would surely lead to death. She didn't even have time to look back on her short life. However, just when Liu Qingye was less than 10 meters from the ground, a figure suddenly appeared. As expected, it was Lin Fan. His eyes flashed, he leaped up, kicked his foot on the moss-covered pillar, and his body flew into the air again. The kick was so powerful that even the pillar was cracked. After hugging Liu Qingye, Lin Fan twisted his hips forcefully, rolled in the air to relieve most of the impact, and then bent his knees. The moment he landed, he protected Liu Qingye's head, rolled twice again, and then slowly stood up. Liu Qingye hugged Lin Fan tightly, her whole body shaking. The group of policemen who came running over were all stunned where they were. What did they see? An adult who fell from a height of more than 20 meters was actually caught. Is this something a human can do? Even if he could catch it, his arms definitely wouldn't be able to withstand the huge impact force. The moment he landed on the ground, both legs would inevitably be shattered. Under normal circumstances, they should have seen 2 bodies. But now, Lin Fan and Liu Qingye are not only alive, but also have no signs of injury. Lin Fan put Liu Qingye down and said in a deep voice, "Your father is on his way." After saying that, Lin Fan turned around and rushed out. A few hundred meters away, Scar Xiong and Lauer got into the off-road vehicle that had been parked here a long time ago. The second brother stepped on the accelerator and the car rushed out immediately. Scar Xiong has been in the business for more than 20 years and is still alive today, so he is definitely not a reckless person. No matter what the situation, he would always arrange a way out for himself. Seeing Lin Fan chasing him in the rearview mirror, Scarface gritted his teeth and yelled, "Turn around and hit him to death." The second brother continued to step on the accelerator, with no intention of turning around. Scarface calmed down, lit a cigarette, narrowed his eyes and said, "Go to the old place and wait until dark before leaving Yunshan City." As he spoke, the off-road vehicle had already rushed onto the road and the speed increased again. Scar Xiong glanced at the rearview mirror but didn't see Lin Fan. "Damn it, I'm going to kill him sooner or later." Roadside. Lin Fan stopped and watched the SUV go away with an expressionless face. After lighting a cigarette, he slowly took out his cell phone and dialed a number. The phone was connected instantly, and a surprised voice came out. "Master Lin, you finally called me." I could tell there was a young man on the other end of the phone. Lin Fan took a puff of cigarette and said calmly, "You owe me a favor, it's time to pay it back." Unex 53A8, a black Jeep. Chapter 27. In a private estate in Garnier State, Meili country. A young man in his 20s jumped out of bed naked, picked up several stacks of banknotes on the table and threw them on the bed. 10,000 per person, roll on, roll on. After saying that, he leaned over the table with excitement on his face, tapping the keyboard quickly with his 10 fingers. A satellite map immediately appeared on the computer screen. Har har, I found it. It turns out Master Lin is in Yunshan City. Yunshan City. Liu Yuanhui has arrived at the abandoned factory. Seeing his pale daughter, he said nothing, but just patted her shoulder. At this moment, Zhou Daong and Wang Fang, who received the news, also rushed over. Seeing Zhu Haoran covered in blood, Wang Fang's eyes went dark and she threw herself on him, crying and cursing. Oh my son, damn it, who chopped my son into this, woo-woo, son, my son. Zhu Daong's face turned pale as well. He grabbed the policeman next to him and glared at him with red eyes and yelled. Where's the man? Where's the man who killed my son? I'm going to skin him alive. The police officer frowned and glanced at Wang Fang, who was still crying. Don't cry, he's not dead yet. Wang Fang was stunned for a moment, then quickly pulled up Zhu Haoran's eyelids and wiped the blood from the wound with her sleeve. Seeing this scene, the nurse who got off the ambulance said unhappily. You don't think your son died quickly enough? Get out of the way, you're just making trouble. You little bitch, how dare you curse my son? Wang Fang reached out to grab the nurse's face, but was pulled away by the police officer next to her. Seeing Zhu Haoran being carried into the ambulance, Wang Fang turned around and pointed at the police officer and cursed. I'm telling you, if anything happens to my son, I will never forgive you. Lin Fan just happened to walk over at this time. Zhu Daong glared. It's you, you bastard. It was you who had Haoran chopped into this state. Wang Fang was completely irrational and actually reached out to grab the police officer's gun. I'll beat you to death, you jinx. The police officer's pupils shrank suddenly, and he kicked Wang Fang to the ground, then quickly stepped back. You bastards, you are in cahoots with this jinx. Wang Fang used her best skill again and sat on the ground and started crying. It's unjust. The police are helping the murderer to bully me. While crying, she took out her cell phone and took pictures of Lin Fan and the police officers. Veins popped out on the police officer's forehead and he took out handcuffs. Zhu Daong grabbed the police officer and glared at him and yelled. If you are not in the same group, arrest this jinx immediately. He must have had someone kidnap my son. He pointed at Lin Fan again and cursed with gnashing teeth. You are such a heartless person. My Haoran treats you like his own brother and said he would let you go back to the Zhou family. But you actually did this. You kidnapped Haoran for money, right? Dream on. I won't give you a penny. However, from beginning to end, Lin Fan never looked at Zhu Daong and Wang Fang. He sat in Liu Yuanhui's car and closed his eyes to rest. A police officer came over at this time and asked in a deep voice. Mr. Lin, do you have any guesses about where Zhang Xiong might be hiding? Lin Fan glanced at the message on his phone and a sneer appeared on his face. How could I know? The police officer nodded and asked no more questions. 1 hour later. Liu Yuanhui drove into Yunlong Villa. Lin Fan took a shower and when he went downstairs, he saw Liu Qingye holding a cup of hot water, and her emotions seemed to have stabilized. Liu Yuanhui exhaled a breath and thanked Lin Fan again. Don't worry, Mr. Lin, Scar Xiong won't be able to escape. Guessing that Liu Yuanhui had made some arrangements, Lin Fan shook his head expressionlessly. You don't have to interfere. I will twist his head off myself. As he spoke, Lin Fan took out his cell phone and walked outside the villa. After lighting a cigarette, Lin Fan dialed the number again. 8 o'clock in the evening. Xiaozhou village is located at the border of Yunshan City and the neighboring city. In a yard at the end of the village that has been abandoned for many years. Scarface put his gun on his back and looked at Lauer, who was standing at the door smoking. I have arranged everything. We will take the mountain road to the neighboring city, take a boat to the port, and then go out to sea. We will reach the country of Meili in half a month. His eyes were full of murderous intent. After you kill that bastard Lin Fan, find a way to come to Meili country to find me. With my savings over the years, I will guarantee you a lifetime of wealth and glory. The second brother smiled, without any nervousness on his face. Do you hate Lin Fan that much? Scarface sneered. That bastard caused me to lose everything. How can I get rid of my hatred if I don't kill him?